you can take place and just remain standing. Your full name, please.
Dr. Craig Stephen Wright.
Sorry, this is not cooperating. And that's Stephen with a V or V? And your position?
I'm the Chief Scientist of a company called Enchain Limited and the CEO of Wright International Investments.
Chief Scientist of Encrypt?
Enchain.
Enchain, sorry.
Small N, capital C.
Enchain Inc. And then CEO of
Wright International Investments.
You are now going to give evidence before the court. In doing so, you are obliged to tell the truth. This implies telling everything you know and not to conceal anything. You must state that if you must tell me if you are uncertain of anything or if you don't remember. And it's a punishable offense to lie to the court. I will ask you to make an affirmation that the evidence you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So I ask you, do you affirm that you will tell the plain and whole truth and not conceal anything? If so, repeat after me, I do so solemnly affirm.
I do so solemnly affirm and swear to God.
Thank you. Please be seated. And then your counsel will start asking you questions. Then the other side is entitled to ask you questions, and I might have some questions as well.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. I think we'll just start straight away with the Twitter statements or the tweets from the plaintiff, since that is the topic of the case. When or at what time did you yourself first see those Twitter messages for yourself?
I don't remember the exact time. I was at work at the time, and it was pointed out to me. My mother and a number of other people had responded over WhatsApp and other such things, asking why don't I do something about these nasty people, and pointed out the tweets.
But was this the first time that someone had called you something on the internet?
It was the first conceited time that someone had gone out in this way. I mean, I hadn't seen all of this before. I wasn't looking for it.
When you became aware of these tweets, what did you do? Did you try and stop them somehow?
I made several complaints to Twitter. I tried to enforce the restrictions on the account, but they kept being turned off by Twitter. I made complaints about that as well.
You said you tried to enforce restrictions on an account. Was that your account, or was that to enforce restrictions on someone else's?
My own account. My Twitter account was supposed to be private, where only people who've been invited are allowed in. But unfortunately, Twitter kept removing that restriction.
And how did this work out for you, asking Twitter to stop messages like this?
I put a formal complaint into Twitter, and several hours later, I had a response back saying that they believe I've violated their terms and they're deleting my account without any explanation.
So there was no other explanation than a general reference to terms and conditions?
No, there was not.
Any thoughts on why that happened? Why did they delete your account?
I'd made complaints, some of which were because of some of the personal attacks. I'd also been receiving DMs, direct messages from people concerning family members and myself.
So is it to understand that this complaint was not just only about the tweets from Hodlonaut, but also other tweets as well?
It was all the stuff following that. So it was him and everything that were being encouraged.
In front of you on the screen, do you have page 721 of the extract with the tweets? If we start on the second one, dated March 16th, it says, Craig Wright is a very sad and pathetic scammer, clearly mentally ill. Everything about him induces deep cringe. I suffer from obviousness fatigue after still having to read posts arguing why he isn't Satoshi. How do you read this? What's a scammer?
He's telling me that I'm someone attempting to falsely raise money without delivering something, without creating a project, for instance. For instance, many of the ICO, well, basically frauds that were launched and now have stopped, were all about raising money without going through the legal requirements.
We see in these other messages you're also called a fraud. How do you read that?
Very badly. I mean, I've worked with law enforcement and trained courts and also military, and being called a criminal when I've only worked for the prosecution is something that I take very seriously.
Have you ever been charged or convicted for criminal activities like fraud or scamming?
I've never been convicted with anything in my life. No criminal offences at all.
Apart from these very specific statements, there are also rather strong characterizations, like sad and pathetic. Everything about him induces deep cringe. What do you think about that?
It's obviously very defamatory.
In a heated debate on the internet, can this happen, that people use strong language?
Yes, but there's a difference between a debate and strong language and truth. I've been upset and angry many times, and in particular after some of the things that I was told in direct messages after this, I got very upset.
But had you had any contact with Hodlonaut before these tweets?
No, none whatsoever.
Did you know who Hodlonaut was before these tweets?
No, and I still didn't care.
You said a little bit about it, but can you explain a little more? Before your account was banned, we understand that happened quite fast. Did people respond to this call to use the hash Craig Wright is a fraud? Was the response on the internet on your side?
I got upset because I had responses about my family. I had direct messages and other things, including I had a set of comments going, your slanty-eyed Asian wife is a fucking slut, and we're going to have her and your half-caste daughter raped. And that very much upset me.
There's a statement here about clearly mentally ill. And it's true, like was stated also, I think Hodlonaut said he didn't know about this. This diagnosis wasn't, I think, public knowledge at that time. But how did this make you feel?
I was told that I was autistic when I was 16. Actually, Asperger's back then. I don't like being called names related to that. I mean, yes, I'm autistic and I have different reactions to people, but I find that incredibly hurtful.
There's a tweet above. There's not all of it, but we can read what is there. My question is to who is talking about from your perspective. I have nothing but contempt for trash like Roger, Fake Toshi, Pedo Calvin, and all their enabling scum. Who did you read these people to be? Was there any doubt? Who was Roger?
Roger Ver.
Fake Toshi?
Roger.
Ver, V-E-R.
And Fake Toshi?
Me.
And this reference to pedo Calvin.
They were calling Calvin a pedophile.
Okay.
Calvinaire.
But for yourself, for Fake Toshi, is that something others had called you as well?
Yes, but it was fairly low key at this point.
From your point of view, if 1 or 10 or 100 calls you Fake Toshi, is it okay because others do something that an individual calls you Fake Toshi? Have you sort of said that's okay?
No, if lots of people get behind a false idea, that doesn't make it right. Lots of people supported Hitler and enabled him. That didn't make it right.
And then on the 17th of March, that's tweet number 3 on this list, as a tribute to Craig Wright being a fraud. I'm going to make next week Craig Wright is a fraud week and tag all my tweets with Craig Wright is a fraud. Feel free to join the celebration. And if we start with that last part, to you, Mr. Wright, did this feel like a celebration?
No, it felt like an attack.
He's saying join the celebration and using a hashtag Craig Wright is a fraud. How do you read this? Is this a call for others to join in or what's going on? How do you interpret what's happening here?
I'm autistic. When I was in high school, I was bullied. This is what this is. It's a person encouraging other bullies to harass people. Over the internet, people commit suicide, people do things because they've been harassed. People like this are attempting to bully others into submission.
And this approach of sending messages on a daily basis and then saying the following week, this is the Sunday, and as a tribute to Craig Wright being a fraud, I'm going to make next week Craig Wright is a fraud week. How did that feel for you? That, I mean, one thing is to have one tweet, but what's the difference for you in having this sort of daily and then also the coming week? How did you react to that?
Because all of my family, people I worked with, saw this and commented on it every day.
On the last tweet on the 17th, it says, the fact that Twitter agrees Craig Wright is a fraud must surely be causing a serious meltdown as we speak, long on popcorn for the next couple of days. How do you understand this reference? What was happening?
Jack Dorsey supports companies like Square, now Block, and Digital Currency Group. Jack Dorsey was the CEO of Twitter. Jack Dorsey is one of the funders for Gareth over there. So Jack Dorsey saw what I was doing as a threat and started funding and helping and closed my account.
There's also a tweet on actual extract, the additional extract on page 62. It reads, appreciation and gratitude to the rabid and toxic maximalists out there. Without them, Bitcoin would have gone to shit a long time ago. Someone needs to be loud and unapologetic to keep us from descending into compromise and lose sight of why we are here. And it has a hashtag Craig Wright is a fraud. This is on the Monday, March of 18th. That's the first day of this Craig Wright fraud week. How do you read this, Mr. Wright, about rabid and toxic and so on?
These were the people who were threatening to rape my wife, my daughter.
We know that your lawyers sent a letter to Hodlonaut through Twitter. Did you get a response to that letter?
Not to my knowledge.
What was your take on this? How did you feel about being insulted in this way by someone on Twitter who was anonymous? What could you really do?
I tried to do something by getting accounts closed. In theory, when someone has threats, etc., Twitter's supposed to take action, but they didn't. Instead, what I saw were pictures of my face with bullet holes, with statements such as, "Oh, look what I found walking through the forest." And basically it was a target with people having shot my face and other such things.
There was made an offer to Granath, both in the Twitter letter and also in a letter sent after he was identified. There was, again, an offer to an amicable solution. Did you get a response after the paper letter was sent?
I got a summons to a court case here in Norway.
If Granath at that time had initiated a discussion, was there any possibility of finding an amicable solution, do you think?
Yes, there was.
So I asked if there was any contact on Twitter between you and Hodlonaut, and you didn't know who he was in March 19th. But is there any chance you had met him in person or talked to him? Was there any interaction at all outside the internet in Bitcoin conferences or things like that?
No.
There is. Just need a second. In these tweets that we've gone through from Granath, can you see anywhere that he substantiates his position? That he explains why he thinks you're a fraud, why you're a scammer, and so on?
No, all of these attacks are designed to ensure that I can't talk, to stop people reading what I write, to stop any argument. The entirety here is to ignore the position that I, as Satoshi, said Bitcoin would scale to be in data centers, that it would be on blocks the size of 2 DVDs, which are huge. Rather, they want to ignore the fact that, like with my arguments with people against Bitcoin, right even before I launched it, James Donald, who said the government could take over Bitcoin. And I said, that's ridiculous, as Satoshi. I said, Bitcoin scales and ends in data centers. So this whole maximalist bit are people who hate what I want because they want a system like Lightning. Bitcoin's traceable. It means law enforcement can always follow illicit funds. Conversely, Lightning is a system that loses the logs. It's not about scaling. It scales less than we scale in Bitcoin, less than the thousands of transactions a second. It doesn't log. 1,200 people have gone to jail because of the dark web Silk Road drug site, because all of those were traced by law enforcement. The converse thing they want is they want Lightning to have no logging. And if there's no logging, nobody goes to jail for drug sales.
We received new evidence very recently. It was basically tweets and statements from you. I thought I'd ask you about a couple of those, since they were raised on Monday. The first is on page 215 of the additional.
A, 215.
I keep missing on the there additional. It's 215. It's the wrong extract. So additional extract, not A. Sorry, additional tilleggsutdrag.
Unnskyld. Skal vi se.
215.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we saw a couple of these. I'm not sure if that one was documented, but we saw several statements you had made.
It's been documented.
Yeah. So is this Twitter?
No, this is Slack.
And is this an open channel?
No, it's a closed group. It's a paid community.
And we also have some statements we can get on, let's see. I can come back to that, I think. Let's check. On this. Just try to cut down on some of the questions because we've been through part of it. You can look at 495 of the additional extract, 495. And this is a tweet from you. It's from 2018. And it says, "This is it. Screw you, toddler." Toddler, is that a derogatory reference? Is that an insult, or what's that about?
Peter Todd's also nicknamed Toddler from time to time.
And you're saying here, "Screw you, toddler." Is that how you usually start a conversation, Mr. Wright?
No, it's a response to the area that they've blacked out. Basically, Peter Todd had been telling people that he's going to crash N-chain and steal all our patents, well, not steal, but take all our patents so that we won't have them, and that my company and all the people will get fired.
Yeah, so you're saying that there was supposed to be something in the black box, but that hasn't carried into...
Yes, that's been deleted for some reason.
If we look at page 629 of extract A.
629.
Of extract A. Remember the previous post was from 2018. This is one from 2017, so it's earlier.
Pick it up here as well.
And this one reads from Peter Todd. Who is that?
The same person, the person who was nicknamed Toddler.
And this one reads, "Apparently Craig Wright is a plagiarist as well as a fraud." And there's a reference to something. Have you and Peter Todd have had discussions about several topics on?
Yes, some of the BTC people, including Peter Todd, put my law dissertation for my Master of Law into, they complained that it was plagiarized and sent a number of letters to the university. The university then investigated and said it wasn't plagiarized, but they still keep saying it is.
These other examples we also saw on Monday, which was documented. Do you yourself sometimes resort to strong language in debates?
When I'm insulted and when I'm being attacked, sometimes I overreact, yes.
But I asked you on this tweet we saw from 2018 on Todd, but on a more general level, if you initiate a discussion or debate, would you use strong language like we have seen in these examples?
If I'm talking about someone such, I will only use truth. Sometimes I've been harsh on that truth. I've called people such as the founder of Monaro a scumbag who's charged with fraud and should spend a long time in jail. He's currently charged with over 1,000 charges of fraud, and he's wanted in 3 countries. So yes, I take a strong position against people who commit financial fraud.
If we go to page 498, back to the additional extract, tilleggsutdrag,
498.
just 3 pages. This was documented on Monday. Thou who tells people to hodl is a scammer pushing a Ponzi. Basically, pump, leave it like light Charlie. The sale is to make a few as the bag holders collapse. Without going into the debate, but you're saying bad Lopp. And what does that reference mean?
The founder of Litecoin, Charlie, and Mr. Lopp were talking about the rise in Litecoin. Charlie had been promoting...
Without going into the debate, we'll just want to identify who this person is, and if we can zoom in a bit, we see that you're quoting below.
Jameson Lopp, yes.
Jameson Lopp. Did you have discussions with him?
I've had many discussions with him. I've known him from the early days of Bitcoin.
And during these discussions at this stage, were you friendly, or was there a hostile sort of take on each other?
It started off friendly, but became hostile later on, especially when people were pumping sort of coins going up in price and getting people involved and just holding.
Yeah, so that was Jameson Lopp. We'll revert to that name later on. So I think from there we will move more into your background. I want to ask you some questions about who you are. I mentioned to the court as we started that you have lived in Australia. Is that where you grew up?
Yes, and I grew up in Brisbane.
And I read portions of the book from O'Hagan, or his writings, about your grandfather. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship to your grandfather?
I had an incredibly close relationship to my grandfather. I spent probably 6 days a week when I was young at his house because I had a single mother. She worked, sometimes multiple jobs. So my grandfather looked after me. My grandfather was an early radio engineer and cryptographer, and he used to basically keep me out of his hair by giving me math problems to solve or computer problems. So he would do things like giving me a log table, and I would manually do the math to calculate it, thinking that it was important, not realizing that it was really just keeping me busy.
And we learned from what we read yesterday that your grandfather had skills and interests in cryptology and math and so on. Were those interests that you picked up as well?
It was. I learnt a lot about electrical engineering, electronic engineering from him. He was trained directly under Marconi in the Marconi School of Wireless, and his master's degree is still classified because it's part of the over-the-horizon radar system in Australia. He was also involved in a number of electronics projects and also sort of cryptography.
And we heard from Donald Lynam's testimony that your grandfather had been involved in a project. He referenced the Enigma project. Can you just say very briefly what that was?
The Enigma project, which was what Alan Turing worked on, was the German cipher machine. My grandfather worked on the Japanese one known as Purple. The Purple machine was the encoding system used by the Japanese Navy to send messages to the submarines.
And we know that you have an interest of Japanese culture. We read about this. Can you explain where that comes from?
Because my grandfather spoke Italian perfectly, with a Tuscan accent, dialect, etc., he was sent by MacArthur into Manila, where he acted pretending to be an Italian officer while working with the Japanese. The Japanese didn't really care about the Italians like, at that time, no one did. They were just sort of the poor cousins of everyone in the Axis powers. And my grandfather helped set up wireless stations and communication stations between the forces still in Manila, secretly, and MacArthur. So preempting the invasion back into take over the Philippines.
And your interest in Japanese culture?
I grew up talking about Japanese culture with my grandfather. He lived with the Japanese military for 2 years. In that time, he developed a deep respect for a lot of what they were and their culture, etc., their aesthetics. So I grew up doing martial arts, learning about Japanese history, etc., from a very young age.
And your choice of pseudonym later on, Satoshi Nakamoto, was that the first time you used a Japanese handle or username or pseudonym?
No, I'd used others. Back in the 90s, I was using Doshai Gaite.
These interests in cryptology and math and so on, was that something you left behind in your childhood years, or did you take this with you as you became an adult?
No, I've remained involved. I haven't ever stopped.
We read yesterday from Donald Lyman's testimony. We also have Max Lyman coming in. Can you briefly say something about your interaction with that part of the family and their interests?
Max is my cousin. He's a little bit younger by only weeks. My uncle Don was very much a father figure, although I didn't see him because he was a wing commander in the Air Force and spent a lot of time in the United States. However, I was in communication with early systems before it was called the Internet, DARPANET, etc. I used to have BBC bulletin board systems that I connected with them, but also very slow UCP and Usenet type communications. Unix to Unix copy protocol is an early form of email exchange. So my sort of summers were spent with them quite often, and I would either go down and visit Max, or Max would come up to our house in Queensland.
Did you have any interests more into coding and doing that sort of thing together?
I've been involved in programming since 1979. I started as a kid. I was involved, that's how I learned about systems such as DEC. I was one of the early members of DECUS, which is a digital users group. I aided the development of some early internet protocols, helped and communicated with people like Robert Ells, who was from University of Melbourne, on DNS issues back in the 80s, back when I was still just young and people didn't even realize I was only a kid when I was doing it.
We read also that you joined the Air Force. About where are we time-wise at that stage?
We're in the late 80s.
And then moving into the mid-90s, I mentioned in the opening statement that you founded an early ISP company.
Yeah, that was in the early 90s.
An internet service provider. When was that?
1991.
What happened to that company?
That was sold to a larger ISP called Pegasus.
And then we know that you worked for the Australian Stock Exchange.
I was hired as the security manager for the stock exchange. 1 year into that, I started my own company and then contracted back because it was more efficient for what I was doing. I set up the Nipper network, which was the peer broker network, because at that stage, the stock exchange was a mutualized company where each of the brokers had equal rights. So I helped set up the first peer-to-peer system for the brokers to communicate across Australia.
And what does peer-to-peer mean?
Peer-to-peer means a direct communication with no central server. So not like the BTC people try and tell you where a user sends to a bunch of nodes that bounce around and sends to another user. It means Alice and Bob, who are communicating, directly communicate with nothing in the middle.
And you said you worked for a year in the stock exchange. You went out and you started a company. What was the name of that company?
De Morgan.
And I understand you continued to work for the stock exchange through that company. But wasn't that a small company to service the Australian stock exchange?
Yes, at our maximum we reached 31 or 32 people. But even at that size, considering the clients we had, we were very lean.
There is a witness coming in at the end of this week who worked for Vodafone. Can you say briefly what type of work did you and your company do for Vodafone?
When Vodafone was first getting internet connection, we created the Asia-Pac firewall and control system. At the time, we're talking the 90s, there were no firewall systems that could handle a number of users that Vodafone had. So my company created the firewall and infrastructure for Vodafone, the management systems, the monitoring systems, and the systems that allowed users to access the internet through the Vodafone network. At that stage, Vodafone had around between 1 and 1.5 million users, if I'm right. Cisco or Checkpoint or the other firewall companies couldn't create a system that would handle that volume. So we did.
So was this a development, a custom system that you had to build?
Yes, it was.
And did you sell or implement this or a similar solution to this to other customers?
We had modified systems for Hoyts later on. Hoyts are a digital cinema chain in Australia. Also UVI, the Australian Stock Exchange, as I said. My company ran the security infrastructure for the 2000 Olympics in Australia. We did work with the New South Wales Police. We were considered a green/blue dollar contractor for IBM in Australia, where we did work, and a number of other entities.
When you were doing work like this, was all the hardware at the client or customer locations? Or did you also have hardware with your companies on your location?
No, there were distributed systems. To have the availability requirement, we created systems that ran in multiple locations.
We also remember from yesterday that your uncle in his deposition referenced your work for Lasseter. What sort of company was that?
Lasseters were the first licensed gaming company or casino in the world. Basically, what they were doing is a casino online, but this was before anyone else had a legally licensed casino. I set up the security infrastructure and helped develop payment systems, logging systems, and control systems for that infrastructure.
Your uncle referenced some sort of payment mechanism that you worked on for Lasseter. Can you say something about that?
Lasseters were losing money because the American government had restricted gaming operations globally. They had restricted the payment through SWIFT. Now, this didn't involve anyone in America, but because of the restrictions, Lasseters weren't able to transfer money from Malaysia or Europe into Australia. As a solution to that, I was working on a token-based payment system that would have allowed instant settlement across banks internationally.
It's possible I've misread, but when reading through the documents in the case file as part of preparations to this case, it seems the other side have alleged that your companies, of which the Morgan was one, but there were others, that these were empty, that was really no activity. Reflecting on what you have explained, is that true?
No, as I said, De Morgan became a public listed company in Australia. We were audited both internally and externally by two of the big four companies. We had an audit committee and we had 30 staff. We had to do reporting on the Australian Stock Exchange. We had a board. The board aren't included in the 32 staff members. And we had operations in 3 countries.
You worked on a project called Blacknet. Can you say again briefly what that was about?
Blacknet is a secure, economically enabled version of the internet. For instance, in early versions of Web Protocol, 402 is an error to do with web transactions saying payment required. The use of credit cards doesn't work. They're too expensive and they don't allow micropayments. So if you wanted to buy something such as an individual page where you're paying 1/10 of a cent, it is not possible using credit cards. With a minimum transaction fee of over 30 cents, you just cannot do this. So what we're talking about is the creation of low-cost systems, micropayments, not just cents, but even hundredths of a cent.
And then you worked for BDO. When did you start working for BDO?
I started working for BDO in the end of 2004, from memory, I believe. I needed accounting sort of knowledge. I'd studied accounting in university, but there's a very big difference between study in university and experience. So I had no experience as an auditor. So I worked for a number of years to learn how these systems worked at a deep level.
And what was your role in BDO? What's the name of your position?
I started as the MIS person, but I ended up as the director of different divisions. I was the director of the Computer Systems Audit Division, the director of the Computer Forensics Division, the director of the Statistical Analysis and Fraud Detection Division, and also aided in other areas.
As part of this, did you have any work related to digital forensics?
Yes, I did. We were engaged by the South Australian Police, where we did an analysis of distributed networks using network graph theory to track down individuals who were involved with child grooming. So basically what we did was we tracked down anonymous accounts who were grooming children as young as 12 or 13 for sex, and helped capture those people and enabled the South Australian Police to have a successful prosecution of a pedophilia ring.
During your working life, those years, did you continue to code and program yourself?
I still do now.
And at that time, in 2005, 6, 7, your years in BDO and so on, what was your preferred coding language?
I code in a combination of some of the C languages. I do code in C++, but I prefer C#, which is a Microsoft version of C. But I primarily code these days in Python.
Please repeat the last.
Python?
Python.
Gavin Andresen expressed that Nakamoto had an old-style approach to coding. Can you say something about that?
I trained back in the 80s, so I grew up with methodologies such as waterfall. Now, waterfall isn't really popular these days because of the whole approach of getting things out and breaking things fast. Because of my background working with the military, with the Australian Stock Exchange, etc., my coding style was one of design first, validate, check, and it's been superseded, is the best way to put it.
Did you use open source tools when coding C++, or was it, what sort of environment was the coding language in?
A combination. Some of the things I used, like BoostBlast, open source, and Minix, etc. But my preferred environment, in which I coded Bitcoin as well, was Visual Studio, which is a Microsoft IDE.
Thank you. If it's fit with the schedule for the administrator, that might be a good place to have lunch.
Looking at the clock, I think so too. Men da ses vi igjen klokken 1:15. Ja, da fortsetter vi.
Takk. So, Mr. Wright, before we broke for lunch, you explained about your childhood, your interest for coding, your work experience related to different IT and security and transaction platforms and so on. I want to now ask you about the development of Bitcoin. And this background and these skills and your experience, was that relevant background for moving into the development of Bitcoin?
It was more than that. It was actually designed for it. I went out and I studied courses when I needed knowledge.
When did the early concept of the idea of Bitcoin and sort of working towards something start?
The idea of making a internet-based payment system and token system started right back in 1998. I'd had talks early on with people involved in the industry, including Tim May. But a lot of it came down to my work with the Australian Stock Exchange and other organisations, including Lassiter's and some of the banks. And I was trying to find a more efficient settlement system, more efficient global payment system.
All your efforts in this area of making or looking at payment systems, did it only sort of result in Bitcoin, or were there byproducts along the way?
No, the best way to put it would be that there were thousands of failures. A lot of my problem with R&D organisations within the government came from the fact that it kept failing. And a lot of people, even in academic circles, told me I should just give up. It will never work.
Was there a flash of insight? Was there a eureka moment where you suddenly saw everything clearly? Or was this a process of breaking down into many steps and so on?
There were many steps, but it really finally came together in around 2007. I'd been working on a number of different tools, digital audit technology, computer-aided audit techniques, etc., as well as developing log systems. And I'd been having talks with my partner, as in the person I worked for directly in BDO, Alan Granger, and we were discussing a system that had been developed, which was a triple entry log system. The difference between a double entry log was it used digital signatures to validate accounts, meaning that some of the things I was working on, like anti-fraud systems, you would have a single book. So instead of WorldCom, Enron, etc., you would have a book and nobody could defraud the system anymore.
Was there one challenge, one problem, or was there a layer of problems within different disciplines?
There were problems within statistics, computer science, economics. Contrary to what people think, there's no encryption in Bitcoin at all. It is not a cryptocurrency. It's not secret. The distinction is that it's completely auditable. The security is actually an economic model. It's not decentralized with thousands of nodes like people say. At present, there are only 12 nodes mining Bitcoin, creating blocks, of which 59% of the hash power at this present moment controlled by 3 nodes. 2 of those are the same owners and same company, and one other is an American company.
We have heard about a white paper, and we heard about the Bitcoin code or program. What was sort of the order here? What came first?
There was a little bit of back and forth, but the primary stuff before I wrote the final version of the white paper was really the code. So I had to actually know that what I was doing would work. So I'd created an MVP, minimum viable product, as a toy version of Bitcoin back in 2007. And I set that up on a number of different machines and around my house and my property. And it seemed to work. And once I knew that I could get it working and scaling, then it was worth going into all the other effort of writing it up, etc.
If we look at extract A, page 57. Can you tell us again briefly, what are we looking at here?
I do most of my notes by hand at first. The way that I work is I'm still old-fashioned. I'm in my 50s. So before I do anything, including coding, I write everything out by hand. I draw the diagrams by hand. I write what I'm going to do by hand. This is even when I write papers now. So the first version here was my notes with a whole lot of later scribbles, etc. But I started documenting what I was going to do for Bitcoin.
We'll look at there's some draft versions in, not in handwriting, but typed into a computer in a Word program. How do you get from this to that?
At the time, what I would do, I use a nuance program called Dragon. So it's voice type. So I would then, rather than typing, I use the keyboard for corrections and I talk into the computer. So I would have my notes and I would just talk through what I want to do. And I keep multiple versions of everything. Even now, like my dissertation we talked of, I think I've got 37 versions of the thing. I finally actually submitted the second version, but you experiment with what you think is better.
This handwritten notepad document, it runs for almost 80 pages. Is everything here? Is this, if we compare this to the final white paper, do they match? Have you simply dictated what was here into the white paper?
No. The first version of the white paper was actually much longer. But when I sent it out to people, including my uncle and others, they said it was too complex and they couldn't understand it. A white paper is not like an academic publication. It's designed to explain things simply. So I went through a few iterations where I cut it down and then I cut it down into the final version.
This document, do you know when you started writing this?
August 2007.
Do you remember writing it in August 2007, or is it simply because it says August 2007 on the...
It says it, but I also know what I was doing at that time.
Was this document created in one sitting? Is this the result of your sitting down and writing one evening and then writing until the 80 pages or so were done?
No, apart from the corrections, the way it would happen would be I'd put down some and I'd come back later. So this wasn't really all 80 pages until about March of the next year.
You said there were edits done there. It says on the upper left hand, electronic cash. That has been overstricken, and it says Bitcoin. Was that something you did in 2007?
Yes, it was. At the time, I was also doing my preparation for my dissertation, my master's in law. And what I was talking about were payment intermediaries. So my LLM's on payment intermediaries are over the internet. But payment intermediaries is a legal term that most people don't understand. So I changed it later to trusted third parties.
But, I was asking about, it says electronic cash at the top. That has been a line over it.
Yes, that's correct.
When was that change made?
Oh, much later. I've used, I go back to my notes and I edit them over time. So I can say it's much later. I don't remember when.
But is it later in the sense that it was 2009 or 10, or was it later as in?
Way later than that.
If we move forwards, if we can flip a couple of pages towards page 60. We see at page 60 it sort of stops.
Yes, I do.
If we move one more page, 61. So breaks like this, is that what happened? Is that just a new chapter, or did you put it down and start again? What's the
No,
what's
I
the
would have
process?
started again. If I'm continuing, I would have just continued on the same page at
And I
the same
wasn't
day.
intending to say a lot about sort of what you're writing here, but what are the topics you're discussing throughout this paper? Not necessarily on this page, but just...
Reducing fraud, making trusted systems, but mainly micropayments. The nature of Bitcoin was actually not to hold and not as a digital asset to go up in value, but one for solving the holy grail of the internet, which was small casual transactions. Small casual transactions is noted throughout my paper. It's noted when I'm talking about things like Satoshi. So it's also about not caring about small blocks. I noted, as in 2008, with arguments with people like James Donald, that Bitcoin ends in data centers. It ends with block sizes to compete with Visa that are gigabytes in size. And I can say gigabytes because 4.3 gig is the size of a DVD, and I said 2 DVDs, which is 8.6 gigabytes. So we're talking larger than now on any system.
If we go to page 78 of this document. It seems to me that there's a change in... Is there a change in the pen you're using, or is it just a copy?
No, they're different pens. Yeah, I don't know why I changed pen. Maybe I started a different day, maybe I did a different place, I'm not sure.
If we move to page 135. These are minutes, it says. What are we looking at? What is this document?
I had a meeting with myself and Alan Granger. I mentioned him before. He was my boss effectively at BDO. I wanted, when I had first started documenting the white paper, to make this a project within BDO. My contract at BDO said that I was allowed to work on things myself outside of corporate hours. I negotiated that, took a lower salary to be able to have my own projects. But I was hoping that the corporation, BDO, would fund this and allow me to do it in work hours. So I was trying to negotiate doing that.
It says meeting and BDO. Is that where the meeting happened, or what's that a reference to?
Alan Granger's room, yes, he had like a separate meeting table, etc., in his office. He was a partner.
It says August, and then do you remember which year this was? Is it August 7th or August 2007?
2007.
Can you remember that?
I know I had the meeting. I don't remember the exact day of the meeting. I should have actually put it down, but I didn't.
Apologies, what does that mean? There seems to be a line.
If anyone else was invited, it's a standard form. So if we had invited other people and they couldn't turn up, you just put an apology there.
It says Finnish code, Finnish POC. An action by C on those two, August 2008 or October 2008. Who is C on this list?
I am.
And what does POC mean?
Proof of concept.
And what's that?
So that would be the initial working version of the code. At that stage, I still hadn't hadn't decided on block times or sizes or how transactions would work. I hadn't integrated fully the scripting language, but completing all of that was what we're talking about for a working proof of concept.
Then it says run up test system, but that doesn't have a C next to it. It says AG. Is that Alan Granger?
It is.
Why does he have to do this?
Because the computer systems that I ended up running it up on were expensive, and I was hoping that I could use the data center within BDO. The national data center was in the New South Wales office where I worked, but to use that, I needed Alan Granger's signed off.
Was that partly the purpose of this meeting, to have these funds and these resources at your disposal?
That was 100% the meaning of this meeting.
There's something there on line 4, set time, what does it say?
Set time chain in action.
And then it says have P2P eCash. What are you talking about here?
Terrible naming, because eCash is a blinded system and Bitcoin's very different. But eCash was the primary digital cash cryptocurrency system that existed between the early 90s and about 2003.
Then it says white paper, action by C, July, August 2008.
One of the things if we're launching a product is to have a white paper concerning what that product does.
It then says, 8, can you help me? It says something, model.
Then we've got graph model and MSTAT.
What's a graph model?
So we're looking at a network model. This is the interconnectivity between nodes and demonstrating a small world connectivity. So basically what that means is that all nodes are tightly connected rather than having hops as a mesh like the internet. One node would send to everything and being able to construct that system, which is very different to how the internet works.
It says also MSTAT.
I was doing a master's degree in statistics. The final dissertation and project I had hoped to model Bitcoin with, but unfortunately it got rejected.
It says at the bottom here, guidelines for a successful meeting. Make sure the meeting is necessary, be prepared, be punctual, and so on. Was this a successful meeting in the sense of, did you get this funding? Did BDO find that this was something they wanted to invest in?
Not long term. It was successful in that Alan arranged other meetings with other people in BDO, but no, it was not accepted.
Do you remember which other persons in BDO you met on this?
I met with Judith, can't remember her last name, Neville Sinclair. I met with Ian, one of the corporate finance partners, and a number of other people. Ian Ferguson, I think, or that. Anyway, it's been quite some years.
During this work, because you mentioned that you were working on this white paper we saw on page 57, had you started on that before this meeting?
Yes, I did.
Remember if you'd gotten very far? Were you?
Maybe 10 or 12 pages of what I'd handwritten.
During your work on the white paper, before it was published, remember it was sent to a mailing list, 31st of October 2008. Before that time, did you share any draft versions or make this available or discuss with someone?
Multiple people who knew me as myself, such as my uncle, Stephen Matthews, and quite a few other people as well. Some guys in development and coding, some of the universities I was involved with, including Newcastle. But on top of that, as Satoshi, I sent it to Wei Dai. I communicated with Adam Back. I communicated with several people, yes.
When did you start using the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto?
About 2005.
We have some witnesses coming in here, but of those you mentioned, are all those on the witness list?
The witnesses coming in, sorry.
Yeah, but you mentioned some people at university and so on. Do these people remember receiving a copy of the white paper today, all of them?
Not all of them. Some don't want to talk, some don't want to be involved. But there are a lot of people that I wanted to be witnesses, yes.
You mentioned that you sent it to Donald Lynham. When did that happen?
Very early on. He received the first sort of alpha draft of the white paper and pulled it apart and told me it was terrible.
And what about Max Lydham? Did he also see this?
Max would have, yes. They were basically living right next door to each other on a farm at that time.
Did you listen to any of this feedback?
Yes. Well, I wasn't happy about it, though.
What about the code? Is that something? Did you share the code at any stage or discuss? Did you have problems writing or developing? Were there?
I didn't really have early writing and developing problems. I had later problems. I shared with quite a number of people, Ray Dillinger, Hal Finney, later on Dustin Tremmell, but things were working quite well in my environment. The problem was more afterwards when other people put it in their environment. When it ran on Craig's computer set up Craig's way, everything was good. But what I forgot is not everyone has their computer set up my way. So there are a few crashes and failures in other people's, including Hal Finney's.
At what time did you start sharing? Was it the whole code or pieces of what you had done so far?
I had gone over some people I knew and talked about sections of code. People like Mark Turner in Australia I used to discuss code with, but mainly his focus was more on the UI, which
UI, yes.
user interface. But he said everything I ever designed was ugly, so I quite often ignored him anyway, and it stayed ugly. But then in November, I sent out segments. I think Ray Dillinger...
November, where are we now? November of which year?
2008.
2008. What about, you mentioned earlier that you communicated with your cousin Max.
Yes.
And you also had contact with your uncle. And that you explained now that they received copies of the white paper. Did they also receive code?
I'm not sure whether they downloaded or not. I had a upload site at the time, and it was available on that FTP server. But I didn't actually monitor which parts they didn't download, did or did not download. So it's impossible to tell now without the logs, but I don't know how much or how little they looked at because I trusted my uncle.
I read yesterday an excerpt from the deposition of your uncle, Donald Lynham, and he explained that he had an Dell XPS computer. He seemed to be proud of that. He said it was hot. Do you know, because he explains that he installed Bitcoin software on that. Do you know when that was?
That was in January 2009.
Okay, so that was after the code had been
Yes.
distributed. Did you have any contact with your uncle about running this software?
Yes, I did. I've visited him a couple times in person, but mainly chats over the internet.
How many versions, if you remember, and I asked you to check of this draft version, the typed version, because we've seen there are some different versions in the case documents, which are machine written, like Word documents. Do you remember how many you were working on in this process?
More than 7.
And there anything we need to know or should ask you about sort of the process here? Because I want to know if are they written consecutively or different versions in play?
There was a combination of both consecutive and different versions. I also wrote different parts at different locations. At the time, I owned a ranch just outside Port Macquarie, which was about 400 kilometres from Sydney, where I lived. I went there every weekend. So the process sometimes involved me copying things fully, sometimes not. And sometimes I would work on different sections. Now, this is pre-cloud days, so it wasn't like having everything on a stored machine. And I would use FTP servers, but sometimes the chunks didn't merge. So now when you use Word, you have one version and it keeps updating. Back then, I used to work on multiple copies and save multiple copies and cut and paste between them.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier that you left BDO at the end of December 2008. Was there any reason for your leaving BDO at that time?
I was already looking to leave. I'd had interviews with Microsoft in Seattle, where before the financial crisis put a freeze on hiring, I was actually talking with the Bing team, which is their search engine and other things, about the possibility of being a product manager and effectively creating Bitcoin could have been owned by Microsoft. Horrible as that sounds. But the financial crisis ended up with BDO wanting to cut staff, and they put up a redundancy package, and that was in end of November 2008, which I took in December, and then basically on the redundancy, I started working on all of this in January 2009 full time.
And then this Genesis block, what was that and how was that sort of started, or what do you do with it?
It's a hard-coded anchor. Now, the comment about the article is because I was studying in London, I used to read the Times. I got it for free from Northumbria. Now, the Bitcoin Whitepaper notes how that you could use a newspaper to show that something didn't exist before a time, because I won't know what next week's headlines in the news will be. Now, this article was the main article. It isn't, like people are saying who read the first bit, anything to do with anti-bank stuff. If you read the article, the Chancellor Darling, was threatening to nationalise the banks. Thatcher had denationalised the banks many years back, and Darling was saying, the corporate banks will not do what I want them to do. They will not keep issuing loans, and if you don't, I'm going to nationalise you. And the article actually is not anti-bank. It is about anti-government taking over and nationalising companies.
And was there sort of a significance beyond sort of that point about what the article is from a more practical perspective? What does it mean when you post this article and start running the software?
One, it's an anchor point, so all software synchronizes on that one file. So it's not mined, it's created. Next, that demonstrates that nothing that occurs on Bitcoin could have happened live before the 3rd of January. The earliest point is the 3rd of January.
And why is that significant? What does that mean to you? What did you want to show people?
It means that there's no secrets. Bitcoin is a public system, so every part of it's auditable. This is why I say it's not encrypted. Anyone can go and validate every single transaction at any time. You don't need to download a full block to do that. Using SPV allows you to do individual transactions. But if you have the statement saying, this is when I started it, then no one can think, aha, there's a secret chain out there, a secret something else. You know exactly what's happened the entire time.
And what was your plan from there? Was that to mine Bitcoins and become rich and retire?
No, I never actually thought Bitcoin would ever even hit $1,000 in my lifetime. The nature of the system was micropayments, so I thought it was all about volume. Now, in my first 2 years, I had a lot of fight with the tax office because I spent in 2009 and 2010, actually in 2009, my total claims for setting up the systems, running the systems, the data centers and everything I used were 2.2 million Australian dollars. The tax office and I had a big fight. They said this was all a stupid hobby, that it would never be worth any money. And we went into the AAT, the tribunal court. And eventually I won, but that was 2013 when the price was a lot higher.
Excuse me, you said you had a claim. Was that for reducing your tax? Or what was the claim?
Okay,
what was the expenses you had for developing?
It was the expenses and costs. So in July of 2009, I'd filed my tax return. Australia's tax ends on the 30th of June. I filed my tax returns in July, and that included a combination of expenses and R&D claims. So in August of 2009, the audit started because they saw this new company who had no revenue and $2 million worth of claims saying, we've got deductions. I didn't get money back because I had no revenue, but the government were claiming that this will never make money. They said it's a hobby. These tokens that no one has any value for, no one will ever buy.
Were you at that time trying to encourage people to buy Bitcoin and hold, or what?
No, I was trying to get people to use it. I had engaged with people about like tokenizing goods, using it for distribution. I actually had a number of talks with porn sites.
But
the porn is the big thing that got the internet going. It's embarrassing, but I was talking to some of the porn vendors about trying to use Bitcoin.
But mining, can you explain what's the function of mining? Because the reason I'm asking is, you set up your Genesis block and you say Bitcoin was running, but at that time, were anyone actually using it?
I was, and on the 12th of January, Helfini did. Dustin Tremmel did shortly afterwards. Marty Melmy started, I think, in February. So I can name the people on like two hands in the early days. But I was trying to actually sell use. I'd been out to a number of companies in Australia, Hoyts, Centrebet, etc., trying to get use of the system. So it wasn't about hold Bitcoin and make the price go up. And mining is section 5 of the white paper, which defines how a node operates, which is you collate, validate, check all of the transactions, then put them in time order, making sure that everyone knows which transactions happened in which order. Then you can reject any double spends because it's like a check. If the first one to be put into the bank is valid, the second one, wrong. So that is then public. Everyone can see what all of these transactions are doing everywhere, and you can instantly know, well, within seconds, know that something's wrong. The ordering then has a proof of work check. The validation is separate to proof of work. After you've created the block of transactions and you've got a hash, it's a binary tree structure.
Now I think it's getting a little bit too technical, but
sorry,
it's my fault because I asked the question. But I read from the deposition of Gavin Andresen. He said he tried running a Bitcoin mining, but he said that he checked and he was running up a cost on electricity bill. So for him, it simply wasn't worth it. Was that the problem?
Apart from more machines coming in by 2010, I had already had a number of machines which limited some of that, but part of the problem was people had started developing GPU alternatives, which were faster. And if you didn't have the GPU code, which wasn't widely disseminated at that point in time, then the cost of electricity exceeded the amount for Bitcoin. So it wasn't right until the start of 2011 that Bitcoin became even slightly more valuable than it was to mine. And it wasn't really a profitable activity till well into 2011.
And then I have to jump a little because we can't go through everything, but at the end, or to take that first, I mean, we saw that Gavin Andresen, he popped up in May of 2010. Can you say something about your working relationship with him? We read emails and such. Did you have a working relationship exchanging patches and so on, like we saw in these emails?
Yes, it was very much a working relationship. We didn't discuss family or anything like this. Gavin never went into it. He asked me a couple times and respected when I didn't talk, which I thought was really good. Most people don't. They want to keep drilling into you and knowing all about you. And Gavin was just very happy to keep working and coding. Gavin was remarkable. I mean, RPC didn't really exist when I started training and coding. And a lot of the distributed systems design, Gavin had been working in more modern universities than I had been. I went to uni doing this in the late 80s. And although I learnt secure coding, I didn't learn a lot of the newer development ideas. And the integration of JavaScript, the RPC developments that Gavin did, the way that he did remote calls so that different nodes within the same network could control nodes. Remarkable. I loved him.
And then you withdrew, or at least you gave Gavin Andresen the administrator privileges. What was your plan then, and why did you do that?
Well, it wasn't quite the way people are saying. I gave him the administrator privilege on SourceForge. SourceForge is a different system to GitHub where it is now. It's very hierarchical. So Satoshi still had the primary admin, and I gave secondary admin to Gavin. Gavin, unfortunately, when I wasn't there, got convinced by other people in the BTC small blocker camp that they should move it over to GitHub, and also because I didn't give over the control keys for the talk forum, they moved the forum server so that they could get access in full. They didn't have the password for the admin, the root on the server, so they set up a new one. That was in June 2011. People still say it's the same server, but that's provably false. So what I wanted Gavin to do was just keep developing the problems that were known that we needed to fix without changing the protocol. I'd been very, very specific that the protocol cannot change.
And for you, why did you give him these privileges and sort of take a step back?
I really liked Gavin. And Gavin actually knew a lot more about coding than I did. And I thought all he needed to do should have been easy, but Gavin likes interacting with other people, and he's like me in some ways. They take advantage of him.
And then we know that you worked on your projects. I need to move towards 2015 because I need to ask you questions about Gizmodo and so on. But in that period, going into 2011 towards 2015, what did you spend your time on work-wise and with your research?
I started having problems because of Bitcoin with my first marriage. I came home one day and I told my wife, I've taken a redundancy and I'm not getting another job. I've got this project I'm doing. And she wasn't terribly happy. That went downhill over the next 2 years. You might imagine that doing this project, that then I get in problems with the tax office who tell me that it's never going to make any money. My first wife was not a happy camper. So I went through a divorce That started in December 2010, where we separated. A little bit before that, but properly out of the house and everything followed. I had the Australian Tax Office to fight. That cost me $2 million.
But in terms of your, that was
At the same time, which I was about to say, I started a company called Panopticrypt. Everything hidden in the open is what it means. I have silly names. What we were working on was improving the scripting language, improving the code. One of the areas I had was Cryptographic, which is Japanese for scriptable money. That would have allowed for tokenization of shares, gold, digital currencies like central bank digital currency, all on top of Bitcoin. So it wasn't a separate thing. It was like a layer inside Bitcoin. So you could use Bitcoin to transmit, say, krona.
Okay, so did you then continue your work within the area of internet payment transactions and so on?
I did. And I started communicating with other people that I'd known from BDO days. Actually goes right back to 2009, but I started the communications more. I was dealing with people like Data Action, Qantas Staff Credit Union, and a number of the other banks in Australia. And I went to people like David Bridges, who I tried to sell the idea of a core banking settlement system that would be more efficient than SWIFT. SWIFT settles over a few days. I was saying we can do it in minutes. Unfortunately, I'm not a good salesman.
Then we know that in the June of 2015, you had an agreement under the heading Summary of Agreed Terms.
Yes.
Again, due to time constrictions, I needed to answer a little more to the point. Why did you enter into this agreement? What was the challenge?
I was having more problems again with the tax office. So I wanted help with managing the companies and protecting my intellectual property. I'd been working and created a lot of intellectual property, and I wanted to make sure that it was safe and my employees were safe, and I had no problems.
And who did you involve in helping you out of this?
I first went to Stephen Matthews, who I'd known from way back at BDO days, who worked in Centrebet. He introduced me to Robert McGregor.
And what came out of your discussions with Robert McGregor? So reference to a platform they were working on, and what was the discussion about?
They had a remittance platform. We were going to integrate Bitcoin to make the remittance process between places like the Philippines and other countries faster, to be able to settle across international borders using Bitcoin as a payment intermediary.
And we've seen this agreement, and it says in the beginning that IP is transferred to this new company. How important part of this transaction was the IP? What did that represent to you?
It's the most critical thing that I had in my life. It is over 30 years of my life, including other bits way before Bitcoin that went into it.
And this role of Chief Science Officer, did that mean that you went from being the boss of your company to being an employee in this new one?
Yes.
And your work, your tasks of research and development, what did you think about that? Was that something you wanted to do?
I loved it. Couldn't think of a better job.
There's a note that we read in this agreement, or the first one. Why are there two agreements, by the way?
De Morgan was a public company, so even though I'd signed the first one, I needed to get board approval. So we had to go to the board and the lawyers. We used Baker and McKenzie for these agreements. The lawyers proposed changes. The changes were approved by the board, and the second version was signed.
There's a note there about a story, someone writing a story. Was that entered into this agreement?
Only as a minor clause. The idea was to document the birth of the company. The companies now have thousands of patents with divisionals, etc., and far more. So we're creating technology, And the idea was to capture the birth of this new company.
Had you by then told McGregor that you were Satoshi Nakamoto? Did he know about that?
No, Stefan told him.
Did you discuss coming out as Nakamoto at some point?
Yes, but I won't use my exact words.
Then what happened? I mentioned in the opening statement that you moved to London. Briefly
Yes.
again, what was the process? When did you move to London?
We started packing up our furniture and arranging that in August. My son, Ben, had started school in a London school, ACS, in August. I moved over, my wife came over in August as well. I came over in October. So October 2015 was when I became a resident in London.
And then we move into November of 2015. And you heard the opening statement from the other side, where they theorized that it was you or someone in this group, Encrypt or someone, who wanted this outing. What was the plan? Was that to have you exposed as Satoshi Nakamoto by Gizmo or Gawker or Wired magazine?
No, it was a terribly stressful moment, and most people don't realize that all the documents that Wired and Gizmodo had were horrible from my point of view. They were doctored, and I mean changed versions of tax sort of audits and things like this. It was everything painting me as bad. There was nothing good in those releases. If I was going to out myself, I would have given them qualifications and all sorts of other things, and something that looked good, not bad.
Did you initiate any dialogue with these journalists? Did you sit down and discuss with them?
No, I didn't discuss them. The only time I spoke was one of them somehow managed to get my mobile phone number and called me. And I said, what the bleep, how the hell do you get this bleep number? Where the hell do you get that bleep stuff, and a few other things like that, and then hung up.
I've read through these emails, and the journalists refer to other sources that are talking to people here and there. Do you know exactly who they talk to?
I know some of the people, but I don't know all. I know Ira Kleinman was one of those parties they talked to, and I know a few others, but I have no idea who they were talking to in total.
Do you know if any of the journalists actually went to Florida and talked to Ira Kleinman?
I know that they were communicating with him. I don't know if they physically met him.
Did you at any point see any of the documents that they had, either from this hacker, which is referenced by one of them, or other documents or information they had gathered?
Not until it came out on the internet. We hadn't agreed to talk with them. The only thing I got was there was an encrypted email sent to the Satoshi Nakamoto Vistamail account, and I decrypted that and sent it around to the organization. I didn't respond, though.
In one of these emails, you refer that to maybe some ex-employees give this over. Do you have a theory about where this came from? Have you checked it? I mean, you worked in security. Have you done have you found out what happened?
I know that there were some people in the company that were trying to sell intellectual property belonging to the company. We found that out. I also know that there were people in the company thinking that they were helping me. So there are lots of things happening simultaneously. I don't know which one occurred.
Did you think they would publish?
I was worried, but everyone kept telling me that there was no way they'd publish.
At what time did you first meet this writer, O'Hagan?
Not until either the very end of December or beginning of January of 2016.
But what was the plan? We have seen references to doing patents, to completing a platform, and so on. was this, and if you had wanted to go out, so why would you have an author come in and write a story to promote you as Nakamoto and then be outed by the magazine? Do you have any reflections on that? Does that make sense?
We're only, based on the numbers, I can tell you an exact figure. We're 57% through our patent portfolio for the research and development material that we started in 2011. So we have issued quite a number of patents already, hundreds of which have been granted. But on our list of what we've got to file, even with now several hundred staff, we have only made 57%. So we are not close to finishing.
Then we know what happened. Even before some of these documents were analyzed and criticized on that basis, the outing itself was criticized, that you couldn't be Satoshi Nakamoto. But how did you feel after these articles had landed and people were criticizing this and that? Did you feel that you were to blame?
Oh, I just felt awful. I mean, I had people camping out, trying to find me and all sorts of things. I mean, before all this, I was a very private person, and I mean, I've done a couple expert interviews for the BBC, that sort of stuff, but things that no one ever cared about. And this was just ridiculous.
This outing, did that have an effect on where you worked and your partner McGregor and so on?
Oh, completely. McGregor changed tone. Rather than a long-term project to build intellectual property over a decade, McGregor started talking to Google and thought he could flip his investment for $1 billion to Google, and had started talks.
And we know that there was a process where Matones was approached, Andresen, and so on. But did you agree at first to do these things? What was your approach?
I didn't agree at first. I got, like the frog being boiled, one little bit at a time. I agreed to talk to Gavin. Then I got talked into talking to John to help talking to Gavin, then one more thing, and the goalpost kept moving. So every time I promised to do something, things were changed. I agreed to do an interview with the BBC. I said explicitly and had it in writing that it was to be only documented, only the person there, no recording, no cameras. And they turned up with a camera team.
I mentioned Lopp. I'm not sure. Do you know how do you pronounce his name?
Lopp.
Lopp. From this debate you had on Twitter. And there's an article from Lopp in the case. And that has actually been used. It's I'm not sure how much you read we sent you the filings and discussed them, but in the actual pleadings to the court, there's a lot of use of arguments from the internet, blog postings and so on. And an example of that is on page 114 in the processkriv extract.
And I need to open that one. Which appears not to be working. Sorry.
Okay, well, it's okay. I'll translate and read from the pleading directly. So this is from page 114. It's a pleading. Let's find the date. 28th of February 2021. And the other side says they're then producing articles from the internet. And they're saying, in addition, there's also the article, How Many Wrongs Make a Right, from April 19th, 2019, which was attached in the pleading, or the writ, the original filing from the plaintiff. And that article points to the following events or points as evident. And there's a long list of bullets from that article. and it runs over on the next page. And then it says, we ask Wright to confirm if any of these bullets, and it's a long list, and if so, and if there is any evidence around this and so on. And I want to look at the actual article and then have Wright comment on this, because these internet articles actually seem to be where a lot of these arguments are coming from. So I'm thinking, let's go to the source, and that's in extract A on page 743.
743?
Yeah, and there I get something else, perhaps in this. Sorry, I sometimes get there's so many extracts. Now I have my machine crashing, just a second. Just a second. Yeah, I'll just use the one on the screen. No, I got it up. Okay. Yeah, I have it. Sorry, it just sometimes there's so many extracts open. Okay, so we're looking at an article from Bitcoin Magazine. It's from, this is the one from 5/8/19. It says, same title as I read, How Many Wrongs Make a Right? And we see the author is Jameson, Lopp. And this list is on 746. So if you go to page 746. Satoshi evidence and lack thereof. What we know and can prove is that, and it says here, he has a documented history of questionable statements and activities. I think we'll just do like, if you can comment briefly, you don't need a long, but just what's your take on this?
He disagrees with me, and he tried to argue that the debate I had with James Donald was really with myself, and that Satoshi wasn't trying to support large blocks. Satoshi was using James Donald as a foil to say that it should be small blocks, which is
This is going
silly.
into a debate, but what's your opinion of Lopp when he's writing this? Is he neutral towards you, or does he have all a prejudice in terms of who you are?
No, he helped found a company that is funded and supported by people who need small blocks and the Lightning Network. The entire value of his company will go away if Bitcoin scales.
And it says he, and this is you, right? He has a history of appearing to exaggerate his academic credential. Do you have a comment?
I deflate my academic credentials. I've never told anyone exactly how many I have.
But, and this goes for a lot of these bullets. Do statements like that actually negate you being Nakamoto?
No.
Do we know that Nakamoto does not have qualities like he's suggesting here?
No, apart from the next line, but then he's saying that the changes to Bitcoin.
Let's wait. The next line, I want to read it. He has made, this is Craig Wright, has made a multitude of technical errors in his writings that call his understanding of Bitcoin and internet technology into question. And before you answer, because I want to help you answer short, is this the really technical errors, or do you have strong disagreements on the position of Lopp as regards issues on Bitcoin?
It's to do with the original version of Bitcoin that I issued versus the changes they made.
Yeah. On the next page, Craig Wright's writing style, according to text analysis and the manner, do not appear to be the same as those of the Satoshi whose writings are archived here. When you met Gavin Andresen, did you submit examples, answer questions, and so on for him to look at?
I did.
What was his take on this writing style and who you were?
As soon as I started talking to him, he knew who I was.
There's a reference here to text analysis. Do you have any thought on that? Someone has analyzed.
Text analysis is statistically an invalid methodology that has been, basically banned in American courts now.
Wright once said, I am a lawyer, and this, financial law, is my area of specialty. Whereas the real Satoshi, when asked about how financial law applied to Bitcoin, said, I'm not a lawyer, and I can't possibly answer that. First of all, your statement about being a lawyer, do you know where that's from? Have you checked where that is from?
I do. That was after I finished the College of Law in Australia.
And when was that?
2014.
And when one is talking on the internet, when I sometimes read on forums, and someone will say, this is not financial advice, and then they will, of course, dispense financial advice, sort of like a disclaimer. Is there also a disclaimer when you're talking about legal stuff?
Yeah. Not only I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer.
Wright once said, at no point have I said that Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, and yet Satoshi called Bitcoin a cryptocurrency on several occasions.
No, I said that it was interesting. I said the word was interesting. That's not the same as calling it that.
The word cryptocurrency was interesting.
Yes, and the way that it was being referred to. Back in 2010, people were talking about cryptocurrency in a different way, and in a discussion, I was saying that it was an interesting term and I'd think about it effectively.
Do you consider this list of bullets? We have some more, but are these strong and weighty arguments?
No, they're basically fluff that have no weight whatsoever.
Wright once said that he is an academic coder who has no idea about real-world coding. But Satoshi has said, I'm better with code than with words, though. Are you better with code or with words? Or what's the academic coding? What's your take on this?
I can write at a level that most people don't understand, and I'm much better with code. But when I'm saying academic coder, it's like we were having the discussion about Gavin before. There are lots of things where Gavin's better. So I'm an old school coder. I'm set in my ways. I learnt back in the 80s, and I can code a lot of things, but there are better ways of doing it that people who do it every day know. It's the academic versus real-world experience.
In 2008, just 6 months before the anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto appeared, Wright made a public post stating anonymity is the shield of cowards. It is the cover used to defend their lies. My life is open and I have little care for my privacy. Is there a conflict in one and the other?
No, Bitcoin is not anonymous. It's pseudonymous. There's a big difference in that. Private, but not anonymous. Bitcoin is a completely open, auditable system. And this is where people go wrong. Bitcoin was designed to be traceable and not anonymous.
But do you think he refers to, he says, the anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto? That means that Satoshi Nakamoto, he is anonymous, and then you're saying anonymity is the shield of cowards. I think he means that using anonymity in saying you're Satoshi Nakamoto.
Wasn't anonymous.
What was Satoshi? What you said?
Pseudonymous.
What's the
Private.
difference?
So Cervantes, the writer of Don Quixote, used an alias. But when he had to come out and say, yes, I wrote this, he did. And other authors, even Mark Twain, use pseudonyms. So a pseudonym is an alternative name. Your publisher knows, your family know, the whole world doesn't need to. Lewis Carroll is a pseudonym.
The plaintiff referred to his account name, Hodlonaut, as a pseudonym. He referred to close friends and so on, knew who he was. Is this basically the same thing?
He was aiming to be more anonymous than I was, but similar.
In February 2011, he seemed unaware of Bitcoin at all, as he was thinking about starting a gold-backed payment system.
No, like I had talked as Satoshi, I'd actually mentioned how other assets in 2010 could be embedded into Bitcoin, and other projects had done this. So when I left to do other things, it was such as central bank digital currencies or gold in script. So a Bitcoin solution.
In August 2011, he began to mention Bitcoin in his writings, but he called it Bitcoin, two separate words, capital letters, whereas Satoshi didn't use space or capital C in emails or forum posts. There was one instance of Bitcoin, capital B, capital C, in the early code base. but Satoshi himself later corrected the capitalization. You have a comment, Mr. Wright?
First of all, Satoshi didn't correct the capitalization. Satoshi used all different types of capitalization and more than once. On top of that, when I use voice software, Bitcoin sometimes comes out differently, and I don't manage my blog posts. I didn't even back then.
He actively bought and traded coins on Mt. Gox in 2013 and 2014. Why would that disqualify you for being Nakamoto?
He's trying to say HODL, like hold your Bitcoin. Now, I've used more Bitcoin than anyone else in the industry. Myself and my companies have gone through just under 1 million Bitcoin in the 13 years that I've been doing this. And you could argue that's worth a lot of money now. So what? The whole thing was to try and get a digital cash system, and cash needs to be traded, not held.
He once asked why you would use X's rather than zeros in a burn address. Satoshi Nakamoto invented the base 58 encoding scheme used for these addresses, which intentionally excludes numbers and letters that look similar, such as 0 and the letter O. Do you have a comment?
Base 58 wasn't invented by Satoshi. It was already used in 2004. Secondly, the conversation here is mischaracterized. I was saying that burn addresses should not be used because you shouldn't be trying to burn Bitcoin to create alternative systems.
Let's see, on the next page, 748. He once claimed that Bitcoin's block size was set in the block header. It's not.
Again, mischaracterizing what I said. I was saying you could calculate using information in the Merkle tree or binary tree structure what the transactions are and other values. So again, he's mischaracterizing what I said.
He once claimed that Satoshi chose the SCCP 256K1 curve due to bilinear pairing properties. But Satoshi once said that I didn't find anything to recommend a curve type, so I just picked one. Now, if you look at curves with bilinear pairing properties, is that 1 or 2 curves, or how many curves are you looking at?
About 70 out of the 1,000. So what I did here was I chose out of the 1,000 possibles, there were 70 that had the property I wanted, and I randomly chose one of those 70.
In an interview with GQ, Wright claimed, I haven't moved any Bitcoins, it says in parentheses. I have sent them to Hal Finney and Suku, and that was it, full stop. But in 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto sent 82 Bitcoin to developer Mike Hearn. Do you know when in 2009 this transfer to Mike Hearn happened?
Much later. What we were talking about were the Bitcoin known to be Satoshi in the first months. And then he's conflating that with an eventual thing that happened months later. The two different scenarios.
He has thus far failed to provide simple cryptographic proof that he controls keys belonging to Satoshi after promising to do so. This is written after the sessions with Andresen and Matones. Do you agree with what he's saying here? Have you failed to provide simple cryptographic proof?
There isn't simple cryptographic proof. To have a signature, you first need identity. You can't prove identity by saying I've got someone's car keys. It states in the Bitcoin white paper that identity is firewalled and isolated from the blockchain. As such, identity is separate, and you cannot use keys to prove this. Every single transaction in Bitcoin is supposed to use a different key, not the same address. So there is no identity linking here.
Does that mean that you cannot simply have one key which controls all your transactions? Does each transaction have a separate key?
It would be possible to create such a system. Using PKI, you could register a key, go to the government and say, this is my key. Now, at the time we were talking about, nothing of the type existed. It does now because nChain's created it.
But in normal Bitcoin transactions, does every transaction generate or need a separate key?
It should, but not everyone does that. Many people breach their own privacy, which is something I said in the white paper you shouldn't do.
It says the cryptographic proof he did provide has been widely debunked by numerous experts, including so-and-so. And here we have a reference to Robert Graham, who we know wrote an article 3rd of May 2016. And that article and these others are criticizing your SART blog the 2nd of May. Does that say, or was it intended to give proof, cryptographic proof, that you are Satoshi Nakamoto?
No, like the thing where Sartre came to this country and said, no, I'm not going to accept the Nobel Prize. I said, I won't accept that designation. I'm not going to do it.
We can go to page 754.
Hva sa du, hvilket?
754. It's the same article, just a few pages on. I just want to take some of these items he's criticizing this Lopp. Altered evidence. It looks as if sometime between 2014 and 15, Wright could have gone back and altered an old 2008 blog post to make it appear he had been working on cryptocurrency in 2008. First of all, when you do blog posts like this, are you typing it in, or are you back then also dictating these in?
No, neither. Right back from 2003, I've been using other parties to run websites that I have. So the process is I will type it into a Word document, and that Word document is sent to an individual who runs my website. There have been numerous, and they manage my blog. For instance, right now, my blog is run by Sebastian at nChain. I write a document in Word, I send the Word document to him, he puts up images, formats it, does everything, and I don't even look at it.
Do you specifically remember writing this blog?
I sort of do. I don't remember the exact details, but I know that the first blog I wrote, yes.
We see that there's a box around the date, that's the same. And then the second to last paragraph reads differently. It's the same first sentence. There's a reference to a cryptocurrency paper out soon, 20 years, triple entry, bookkeeping, BDO was good for something. Have you written this in?
No, I have not. Bitcoin's not a cryptocurrency paper.
Sorry?
Bitcoin's not a cryptocurrency paper. It's digital cash or electronic cash.
Have you instructed someone, a third party or someone, to do this on your behalf?
No, and I wouldn't tell them to remove my first wife's name. They removed.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Above that, it says with my wife Lynn on one side and with my wife on the other side. I would not have removed her name.
Where is that? I'm sorry.
If you go up from the bottom red thing, like there's a larger paragraph there. 2007 that I purchased today to watch on my screen with my wife Lynn. Ruins, which is a movie. On the other side, it says with my wife. So she's been written out of the history.
Do you know then what has happened here?
No, I'm still friends with my ex-wife, so although we split up, I mean, I wouldn't write her out of history.
And then on the next page, it's an email. It says, furthermore, a sleuth on Reddit. What Reddit?
Reddit is a rather toxic community where people basically put up a whole lot of information and slag each other, is the only way I could put it.
That according to registration information, a domain shown in one of Wright's supposed emails to Kleinman, a key piece of evidence that Wright is Satoshi, was not purchased by Wright until January 23rd, 2009, 10 months after the date on the email. And this email we saw before, I think it was from Gizmo, might have been wired, but in that outing. Can you remember writing this email?
The subject line I can. I did speak to Dave around that time, but no, actually the email's not that familiar. It doesn't read like me.
I think there's at least one other version of this email with a different email address on it. And it says here that some person on the internet says that domain information defense wasn't purchased or registered with you until later. Do you have any comment on that?
One, I don't know what happened, but I had an Exchange server running Active Directory. That was originally with ridgesestate.org. I changed that in 2009 to Information Defense. The way that Outlook and Exchange work, I'm not running like most people connecting to a server. I ran the domain server myself. If you change the domain, it will update all of the emails in the fields. I can't even say that happened because the last line doesn't read like something I would say.
It says here a key piece of evidence. This is from the Gizmodo article. Did you present this as evidence of your being Satoshi Nakamoto?
No, a lot of the evidence in Gizmodo presents David Kleinman as a bigger part than just editing like he did.
Did that cause you some trouble later on down the road?
I was sued by Dave Kleinman's, who was my friend's brother, Ira Kleinman. Ira Kleinman was claiming that Dave Kleinman was 50% of the entire partnership and had been communicating with people, including Gizmodo, trying to say that Dave Kleinman was writing and coding Bitcoin.
KPMG have made a report on a series of documents which are in the case. I know that you've seen this report. Do you have a comment or any thoughts on the method used by KPMG? I know you have strong opinions on this, but to be brief.
So I used to work in digital forensics, and I've written a textbook on the subject. I taught it with the New South Wales Police College. And what I have to say is the KPMG methodology is not replicable. It's not scientific. You cannot take what they've done and replicate it. Any expert report should be replicable. Standard practice in science is that you can give it to someone else and they get the exact same results. You can't do that.
But it's a very long report. It runs over 200-something pages. It seems to have been a very
Most of my reports, when I did well-constructed, replicable reports that went into criminal cases, were between 20 and 25 pages. When you have nothing, you put more.
There's a reference document which we looked at yesterday. This was the SSRN. And KPMG said, here's a reference document, and there's a hash. And then BDO and Cypher, who have been called in from this side to look at these findings, they were unable to find a file that matched this hash description. Do you know what has happened?
It means the file that KPMG is saying is the same one from the internet is different. The hash value won't change unless something in the file's changed. So 2 independent companies have downloaded and gotten the same hash, yet KPMG maybe have opened it in Word first or opened it in Adobe first, which has contaminated the file.
And would that be a problem?
It's a huge problem. If you contaminate evidence, then you can no longer trust it. If you, for instance, open something in Word rather than a forensic tool, you've added additional metadata or changed metadata to do with the file you're analyzing.
It was said by the other side that the conclusion from KPMG and also asserted in the opening statement on Monday that all of these documents have been manipulated. Do you agree with that conclusion?
No, you can't make the conclusion. You can say that there are unexplained alterations, or you can say that things have changed. But to actually say manipulation requires additional evidence. You would need to know what's happened and how it's happened. And for instance, if you had logs from a server, you could say who had logged in, why it's changed, but none of that has been analyzed.
For some of the documents examined also by BDO and Cypher, there are obvious explanations, like the ones I showed some in that category yesterday, where it's been scanned, basically. And for others, it's been necessary to do a little more thinking, sort of, okay, go back a couple of years, what could have happened? But still, there are a couple of documents where I don't see BDO or Cypher saying, this is what happened. Does this give grounds for concern? Because there are unanswered questions, as I see it.
Well, yes. The reason not only that we hired BDO, that we also then went to Cypher, was that I was concerned about these documents and I wanted an explanation myself. Unfortunately, we don't have any of the early log files for many of these servers. Some of them go back to 2011, and since we've moved to Australia, we don't have them anymore. So without that, they're not able to give me any more answers.
But you were outed. We have the articles from Wired and Gizmo, and you wanted to prove, or you were convinced you had to prove you were Satoshi Nakamoto. When you did this process in 2016, did you rely on documents to show you were Satoshi Nakamoto? What was your approach?
My approach was very simple, and it's what I still want to do with other cases. There are 80 to 100 people who know all about my history creating Bitcoin. And I've had problems with lawyers trying to get people in court. I don't know why, but I just want to walk people who know my history into court and have people testify. My opinion is people are evidence. Old files that have been accessed by, we had 54 people in 2013 and working in De Morgan on public servers. Other systems have been hacked. I mean, sitting there and going, you can prove with a file? No, you can't.
But this is something we see referenced in the case. Gavin Andresen, when he asks for his 4 criteria for proof, he says emails could have been hacked. Keys could have been stolen or hacked. This is his take.
Yes.
For normal people, I think hacking is like number 1 on their lists of concerns. But when you are a well-known figure or people know who you are you more susceptible to hacking in this sort of activity?
More, because there's also a lot of money involved. There's a lot of intellectual property. That intellectual property is highly valuable. So people want to steal that as well, not only the keys, but the IP. As you may guess, any intellectual property that hasn't already gone to patent can be stolen and replicated. And some of these patents are worth a lot of money.
You have I would say, a special history when it comes to documents, because you have the Kleinman case. And I mentioned in the opening statement that we have checked, and roughly 1.9 million pages of documents were sent to your opposing party in that case under discovery. Was that documents only from you personally, or also other places?
No, these were from the corporation. The search match out of 34 million or so documents, I can't remember the exact number, but something like that, returned 1.9 million that had matches based on the criteria in the US, and they were given over. They were created between 2007 and 2016 or 17, and they involved not only me, but up to 54 staff members. There were also laptops from ex-staff, email addresses from servers from ex-staff, and from external parties, including government agencies and others.
Were any of these documents later filed in the Kleinman proceedings?
Yeah, most of those were filed, and some of them were used.
Would those then be available for download for people on the internet?
Yes, both the ones from third parties and myself.
Craig avslutta litt tidligere, men
Ja.
tid.
Jeg tenkte på min del at begge to tok jo litt mindre tid på første vitne, så vi har spart inn litt der. Vi hadde 2 økter per, så jeg har lagt opp til egentlig utgangspunktet var 2 timer for den som spør, og 1 time på den andre siden. Og så har begge en liten rest, så jeg tenkte at vi hadde ca. 2 timer og et kvarter. Og da tenker jeg hvis vi tar en liten pause nå, så holder vi på til ca. 14.35, hadde jeg notert meg, ish. 14.35-14.40.
Ja, så det betyr at du har igjen 10 minutter, et kvarter. For da er det jo egentlig ikke greit å bare avslutte, gjøre ferdig din før vi tar en pause.
Ja, fortsett der. Vi kan ta et kvarters tid til.
Du må ikke fylle opp et kvarter hvis du...
Nei, det er mer å begrense meg, for å si det sånn. I need, again, please answer my questions fully, but we need to be even more precise now because we addressed the issue of time. To then conclude on these reports and also the questions from Lopp and so on, have you changed or manipulated documents as suggested by KPMG and the others?
No, I have never changed any documents or manipulated any documents.
Have you instructed any other persons or third party or someone to do that on your behalf?
No, I have never, ever in my life instructed a third party to manipulate or change documents.
Okay, so we need to go also into the proofing sessions. John Matones, when he did a proofing session, who chose which keys would be used? You know, who?
John.
And what did he choose from? What was his sort of selection? What was he interested to see signed?
I had 1 to 11 or 12.
And when you say 1 to 11 through 12, I think it's very clear
The
for you.
keys associated with the first 12 blocks created on Bitcoin.
And why were those especially relevant?
Because it was believed that only Satoshi would have been mining. And there was also an email from Hal Finney noting a payment from myself. And that, of course, is some evidence that it a key belonging to Satoshi.
Did you also talk to John Matones, discuss Bitcoin issues?
I had originally met John in a conference in 2014 in Australia. And yes, I pulled apart all the different problems that core developers were saying with Bitcoin and the errors they were making.
Did Matones say anything when the signing session was over? Did he need more proof, or was he satisfied? Or
No, he shook my hand and thanked me for creating Bitcoin and yeah, wanted to get a drink.
If we then go to Gavin Andresen. So this signing session, where did that take place with Gavin Andresen?
It was a hotel in Covent Gardens, a Covent Garden hotel. Like it's a upscale hotel.
Yeah. So again, did you choose which keys will be used, or did Andresen choose?
Gavin did.
Had he prepared this in any way?
No, we were not prepared in any way.
And then we read O'Hagan has interviewed the people present, and he describes that there was an impasse. Things stopped because you had signed on your computer. Where was Andresen then? Was he on the other side of the room, or was he able to see your screen and hands and what you were doing?
He was near me. He could watch. He saw everything I did.
And then came this discussion. He says that he wanted to use his own laptop. Why did you disagree to that?
Because it's not about the private key, but if I gave him a signature file, he could then publish that on the internet. And if I'm saying I don't want everything published, then there's no way I could prove. Although I liked Gavin, thought the sun shone out of Gavin, but I wasn't still going to trust him that much.
But had he announced in advance that he wanted to use a separate laptop?
No.
And this laptop, which was acquired, how was that arranged? Was it someone in the room going out and buying it? What happened?
I don't know who bought it, but someone was sent to, I can't remember the name, like a British Radio Shack type thing, like where they sell computers. They just bought one on the spot.
And who unboxed the laptop and configured it?
Gavin.
Did he physically open and unpack the laptop?
He did everything.
Did he need to install anything before using the computer?
He needed to install the operating system, and he needed to download Electrum. He also updated the browser and a few other things.
In your Sartre post, there's a reference to doing signings. You say one was done using Windows 10, one was done using Windows 7.
Yes.
Which case was it here? Do you remember which operating system was used on Gavin Andresen's PC?
Gavin was on 7.
How did he connect that new computer to the internet?
He connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. I'm not sure if it was direct or whether he used a dongle. I mean, like a third-party hotspot. It was provided by the hotel, though.
Do you remember specifically which browser he used?
Internet Explorer 11.
We've seen this discussion about downloading Electrum wallets and so on. Did you log on to the Electrum site, or did he and download wallets?
It's no logging on. You just go to the site. Gavin downloaded, and Gavin got the checksum. He didn't do the signature file using PGP because that would require using PGP. But if the hash mechanism, which is the checksum, was broken, then the entirety of Bitcoin would be broken. So that would be a silly thing not to trust.
You said he checked the checksum. So what actually happens? He goes to the Electrum site, and does he click on the file?
You say, yeah, you download and save.
And where does the checksum come into play?
The checksum is listed on the Electrum site and can be used to validate that the file has downloaded correctly.
I mean, this seemed to have taken some time. Did you also talk to Andresen during this time, or were we sitting silently in each corner?
No, we talked extensively. It was really nice.
Did he ask questions related back to 2010 and the work on Bitcoin development?
Yeah, it was really good. I loved going back. It's one of the best parts of my life, working with him. I miss it.
Did it work perfectly, this signing?
No. A digital signature is a very long string. So as you can imagine, because we were using two computers and typing this string of hundreds of characters in, and they're not words, they're upper and lower characters and all this stuff. We got it wrong several times. And going and checking and going, S, capital U, P, and checking those things and going back and forwards to check so that we weren't compromising the process took a while. It failed many times.
Andresen,
Finally got it right, though.
Yeah. Andresen points out in his deposition, and O'Hagan in his book, that you seem to have reservations about the whole process. Is that true?
Yes. I never wanted to ever come out and be known as Satoshi.
Gavin Andresen and Matones, they have not retracted their conclusions. We have seen, I think it's clear from what we've read from Gavin Andresen's depositions and his many statements on conferences and interviews, that he was disappointed in what happened afterwards. But he seems to still hold that the signing was true. But he has been the subject of a lot of criticism on the internet. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. As I said, the web, I don't run my own blogs. Robert McGregor was running my blog, And Robert McGregor made many comments to people about things he thought he could get me to do. When I said categorically I was not coming out, I meant it. Unfortunately, Robert thought that by telling everyone that I'm going to do these things, he would get me to.
But this Sartre blog, I understand that you made a draft and changes were made to that by Robert McGregor.
Yes.
But was it you writing in Sartre and the reference to refusing the Nobel Prize and so on?
It was. I was basically doing my final, I'm not doing this. I'm refusing.
Did you write in the draft or in what was posted? Is it actually stated that here you're giving proof, cryptographic proof, that you're Satoshi Nakamoto?
No, in fact, the opposite. It's I'm refusing to prove to you publicly. Go away.
Did you think that with that title and the reference to Sartre and explaining that perhaps someone out there on the internet would understand that?
I'm too much of a smartass for my own good. I have figured out after this that practically no one in information technology knows who the hell Sartre is, let alone that he turned down the Nobel Prize, let alone that he was an existentialist. So,
Yep.
Being a smartass is not always good.
We know that after the Sartre post and the criticism that entailed, Matthews and McGregor tried to arrange a new sort of fix to this problem by having several people send bitcoins to your account and then for you to return it. And we were moving into position to do that, but then you didn't.
I said I'd discuss it. And before I even had a chance to discuss it, they'd already gone out there and told everyone, which isn't discussing.
O'Hagan, he describes, I read this was where we arrived at your house and the blue sky and the plane trails. This private session at your house, what did you actually show him? What did you do in terms of cryptographic proof to O'Hagan?
I was explaining how Bitcoin worked. I was going through the entire process, how it was designed, how it functioned. And while I was doing that, I still had the early keys loaded. So I demonstrated with the first 12 blocks how Bitcoin worked.
So we have talked a lot about Bitcoin and your development of Bitcoin and so on. In the blog post from Matones, he mentions towards the end that you're also doing research on new things. And I pulled out a list of some patents, and I just want to ask you about that. There is a patent here with reference number EP3259725A1, Universal Tokenization System for Blockchain-Based Cryptocurrencies. Is it possible to summarize that? I haven't asked you to prepare for this, but do you have like a sentence or two?
Yeah, so back in 2016, we took work that we'd been doing in Australia and we filed a tokenization system that is effectively now called an NFT. So NFTs, according to Vitalik, who called me a fraud, were created in 2017.
I just need a description. What's the technology? What does this patent describe?
NFTs.
Okay. And then patent number 2, I'm not going to read the number, but the title is Secure Multi-Party Loss-Resistant Storage and Transfer of Cryptographic Keys for Blockchain-Based Systems in conjunction with a wallet management system. Can you translate that into more understandable?
Yes, it's a multi-party threshold system using a homomorphic encryption scheme. What it will then do is allow multiple parties to simultaneously do keys without ever creating a copy of the key. So if we gave it to each of the people in this room, you could say that half of these people need to interact and they can create a signature without ever recreating the actual key.
And there are more patents here, but Who is the inventor of these patents?
Myself and people who work for me.
If you hadn't been outed as Nakamoto by Wired and Gizmodo, what would you have done? What would you be doing now?
This slowed down the patent process. Would be likely at 75% rather than not even at 60.
And what if you could choose between going out as Nakamoto and doing a role as chief scientist and doing a research, what's your preference?
That's a silly question. If I could stay super secret, wealthy, running a company and having no one know who I am, yay.
Thank you. And then I'm done with our questions.
I think we'll have a break then. 15 minutes, tilbake 10:30. Vær så god. Ja, advokat Haukås, da er det din tur. Eller jeg vet ikke hvem av dere som skal stille spørsmål.
Jeg begynner I hvert fall. I think I'll just start with asking some question related to what you said in your primary testimony, and then I'll come to my question afterwards.
Yes.
I'll just take it in the same order that you said it. And the first thing you said that I want to ask you about is that you said that you were never convicted of anything. But on your Wikipedia page, which is on the A, page 29.
A29.
It says under career and business in the second paragraph, it says that in 2004, Wright was convicted of contempt of court by the Supreme Court of New South Wales. Is that correct?
No, it's not. The Wikipedia page is wrong. I was given a contempt of court, but it is not a conviction. It's not a crime in Australia. It's not a criminal offence. So no, that's not correct.
So when it says that you were sentenced to 28 days in jail and subsequently suspended to a condition of performing 250 hours of community service, that's not correct either?
No, I was given the community service. That's correct. I was rather belligerent, and unfortunately, the judge didn't like my attitude.
Okay. And also, and I appreciate this is rather sensitive, but you said that you got rather harsh messages about your wife and your daughter.
Yes, I did.
And do you think that was related to the tweets in this case?
It was mentioning Hodlonaut and others, and I got emails and other follow-up material.
And is that something you have been a subject to before, or?
Not until Hodlonaut started his campaign, no.
Okay. Because in the A bundle, page 994.
Jeg tror du må ha mikrofonen litt nærmere når du snakker. Hva sa du? 994?
994.
Yep.
You mentioned to Gavin Andresen in 2017 that trolls do not threaten to rape your kids. So it seems like you have gotten similar messages back then, is that correct?
Yes, there are a few back in 2016, but they didn't keep going.
Okay, but you have gotten such messages before?
In the past, yes. I try not to remember them.
Yeah, but when I ask you whether or not you have gotten messages like that before, you have to answer truthfully.
As I said, I didn't remember, but yes, I have.
Okay. Let's see. More things. Yeah, and you said in the Gizmodo articles, they referred to some documents, and you said that they were changed versions that made you look bad. Is that a correct reference from your testimony?
Yes.
So can you explain how they were changed? what documents were changed and what documents weren't changed? Do you remember?
As an example, the ATO files, the ones that are there, you'll find that the metadata on all of those is 2015, and they are timestamped with Gizmo. The so-called transcripts from the Australian Tax Office, I noted in the Florida case, are not correct. None of those are what occurred. So these all build a story that incorporated Dave Kleinman. So they've been changed to build his role more than it was.
Okay, so is it then your testimony that any reference to Dave Kleinman in those documents were sort of altered or manipulated in some way?
I'm saying the entire documents are manipulated. They are not accepted transcripts.
Okay, and what about the other documents that were presented there, for instance, the email to Dave Kleinman and the email from Dave Kleinman from 2011 with the Tulip Trust document attached? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do, and that's also altered, although there are documents from Tulip Trust, but that particular one's been changed.
Okay, and is there any real documents somewhere?
Yes, of course there's real documents somewhere.
But do you remember if the documents that's been presented in this case, the email from Dave Kleinman with the Tulip Trust document attached, is that the real one or is that the altered version?
Dave was never part of the Tulip Trust.
So is the document in our case, if we can pull it up perhaps. It's on page 284. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
So this is an email, and on page 285 there, the attachment to the email is presented. Is this a real document or is it a manipulated document?
I believe this one's a manipulated document looking at it, but there are other versions of things as well.
Okay, so Dave Kleinman didn't send you an email on the 24th of June?
No,
2011?
Dave Kleinman sent me several emails on the 24th of June.
He didn't send you this email?
From what I can see of this one, no, this one doesn't look like the original.
Okay. And you said that you never, in relation to the Jameson Lopp article, which is on page 743, there was a discussion on that you had once said that you had never called Bitcoin a cryptocurrency. You remember that?
I do.
And you said that you had never called it a cryptocurrency as Satoshi. You remember that?
I remember that I said I didn't reference the way that he was implying, yes.
But if you look at page 271 of the hearing bundle here, is the forum post from Satoshi announcing version 0.3 of Bitcoin, the P2P cryptocurrency. You see that?
I do.
Is that something you have written?
No, that was written by Marty Melmy.
Is it written by someone else?
Marty Melmy.
Okay. And then when we come to the 12th of March 2008 email, and this is referenced on page 755 in the...
Which page?
755. I think you said that you remember the subject line, but you can't remember the text of the email. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you're saying that you have never written the text that we see here?
I've written some of the text in the past and similar, but there are bits that aren't what I've written. The parts about like releasing on GMX, VistaML and Tor, etc., that's altered.
Okay.
The whole sentence there is altered or added or just...
It looks like added, yes.
The whole sentence, the whole line. Okay.
Okay. But if we look at the hearing bundle B, which is a transcript from Florida case, page 2534. And I just start reading from line 12. Ms. Marco, objection to it. Why is it not the email you sent? And it's a reference to the 12th of March email. We see that on line 8. Because this is an import into a different mail server that exists at a later time, you say. Is this an identical copy of the email you sent to Dave Kleinman? Objection. No, because when you import something from one exchange server to another, it's not identical. And then the question is the text of the email identical? Objection. I am unable to say whether it is identical. It looks the same. Did you send this original email on 12th of March? And this is not an email, you say. And the question is, did you send an email that looks the same as this on 12th of March? Objection. I sent an email that contains the body that was approximately like that. If not like that, I can't say exactly because this is a copy or whatever else. So here you say that you sent something similar at least?
Yes, like I said, if you add a line, it's approximate.
Yeah. And in the court documents to this case, which is in the P bundle, page 202.
I can't open that bundle, I'm sorry.
Sorry?
The P bundle can't be opened.
Really?
Yes, I tried that under his examination.
Okay.
Something's wrong with the file, I don't know what. I have it here on my iPad, that's why.
Yeah, okay. But there you say that Granat has alleged that the email of 12th of March, Exhibit 32 to Granat's brief of 2nd of July 2021, is manipulated. Wright contests this. Wright wrote an email at that time with such a content. It said there.
Hvor du leser fra nå?
Point 25.
På hvilken side?
Page 202.
Ja.
So in the case preparation phase, you admitted to writing this email.
No, I said that there was something close to it. It's not the same thing.
And I now come to the Gavin Andresen proof session. When asked by Manshaus, you said that Gavin Andresen did not announce that he was going to use a separate laptop beforehand. Is that correct?
Not to me.
But if we look at the bundle on page, the A bundle on page 855, we see this is a email chain between you and Gavin Andresen, and on page 855, the second to last paragraph, it says, and this is Andresen writing, I just spent some time thinking about what I'd like to get out of the meeting tomorrow. I'll be bringing my laptop and a brand new USB stick. I'd like to see some or all of the following copied onto it so I can verify on my laptop. Is this not something you received beforehand?
Possibly, but I don't remember. And I still didn't respond to it saying that I would.
Well, you did respond to it at least, but maybe not. Okay, and I then turn to the private keys to the, let's just call it the Satoshi Bitcoin, if you then understand what I mean.
If you're referring to the first 12 blocks, then I'll accept that.
That's fine. Let me just ask you first, do you have access to the private keys to those addresses in those blocks at this point in time?
No.
And have you at any point in time have access to them?
Yes, I created the algorithm that calculates them.
So if you just take us back to the beginning, say, did you have access to the keys in 2009 and 2010?
The way that it worked was actually an algorithm. So in 2009, yes, but that was locked in a server. The mining algorithm used the homomorphic properties of ECDSA. ECDSA allows you to add keys. So I can get key A plus key a value that I multiply by the curve multiplier G. And even though I don't have the subkey and I don't know it, I can have the public key calculated and I can create and run blocks without having to load the private key.
So you're saying that the keys are encrypted in some way?
Yes.
And when after they are encrypted, would you then be able to access them if you wanted to?
You have to decrypt something to access an encrypted file, if that's what you're talking about, sorry.
Yes, would you be able to do that?
I don't own them, technically. I set up a company, and the company does. So it's a corporate thing.
Yeah, I'm not talking about whether or not you owned the private keys or you owned the Bitcoin associated in the addresses. I'm just asking, would you be able to, if you wanted to, decrypt the file?
Again, it's not an if I want to. I have corporate structures. Corporate structures don't mean Craig can do whatever I want. In 2009, I moved Information Defence, the company I set up in Australia that was mining.
I think I understand that you're saying that you legally couldn't do it because the Bitcoin was owned by someone else. I'm just asking
if you have companies with multiple people, and multiple people have different roles, those people have to be involved. Now, I can't force people to do things. I have to go through all the process, and I'm not the person in charge, so to speak. I have to go through all the normal corporate processes.
But you had, at some point you had a file with the private keys in it?
No, I had an algorithm. What I had was an algorithm that uses a HMAC with a password. That HMAC calculates a key. That forms a hash chain. So I take the original key and I hash it, and I hash it, and I hash it with the value of where it's like the number. That allows me to create a series of keys that are all linked deterministically to the first one.
I don't think I understand this, but would you be able to, if you wanted to, in 2009 or 2010, to get access to the private keys so that you could sign a message or transfer Bitcoin from one of the addresses?
In 2009, definitely. After I started my problems with the Australian Tax Office, I set up Wright International Investments. That was August of 2009. I set up the corporate structure and moved everything while it was still not worth anything, and set up the structure so that I don't have full control for tax purposes. By removing full control, the tax office can't say that I have to pay tax when I move out of Australia, for instance, and I don't have to pay a whole lot of other corporate taxes.
And in what way did you remove control?
I set up a corporate structure. I set a number of companies. Wright International was owned by a company that I already owned called Ecuador. Ecuador was founded in 2007. Wright was founded in 2009. The management company for Ecuador was a combination of companies in the Seychelles and also in Costa Rica and Panama. I have a history of, I was involved in gambling, legal gaming. So I had money overseas already, and I structured things to be able to handle these corporations.
And at what time was this? This was in 2011?
This was in August 2009, starting when I had the issues, the first audit with the tax office.
So from August 2009, you weren't able to access the keys anymore? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying I had to go through extra processes. Those became more difficult in 2011 when I set up and moved everything into the trust structure.
And in what way was it more difficult in 2011?
Once I put a trust structure in place, then that removed all of my access until 2020. The reason for this, the Australian Tax Office had put a negative finding against me, and I was debating that in court. while they do that, they're allowed to try and extract money. So the Australian Tax Office put a bankruptcy notice and tried to foreclose. I fought that as well. And when I won against the tax office...
I'm just asking how it was more difficult to access the private keys. I'm not asking why.
Trust structure.
So is it a legal thing that prevents it, or is it more like a actual thing?
It's a trust structure, an actual trust structure. I had set up the trust, which is mentioned in an Australian court case that you mentioned in 2004, back in 1998.
But just to be clear, a trust structure isn't an actual thing. That's a legal structure,
Yes,
isn't
actually it is. It's got a registered number and everything now.
It's still not an actual thing.
Yes, a trust is an actual thing. I don't know about your law over here, but a Seychelles trust is a registered entity. It has management bodies. It has, I've got 30 people doing the management and working out this trust.
I think we got an expert opinion from George & Co. that says that the trust is not a separate legal entity. Do you disagree with that statement?
I would disagree with that. And
but you're the one that presented it.
No, there are differences between a blind trust and a trust. So if you're talking about a blind trust under British law is where, for instance, someone gives over property to another person with a contract, like an agreement, that isn't in writing. Now, this was used in British history. For instance, say a lord got someone who wasn't his wife pregnant and had a child that he wanted to give money to without the wife knowing. So he would set up a blind trust so that his friend would make sure that the other child, that was his child, but the rest of the family didn't know about, would get paid.
Yeah, I think we all understand that. But how was how was it made more difficult for you to get access to the private keys after the trust structure was set up?
I implemented a corporate structure because of the Australian Tax Office wanting to bankrupt me. If they'd bankrupted me, that means they would be able to take my assets. To protect my intellectual property, I took all control away from myself until it would have passed like the number of years plus one. And then in 2020, I regained control of my intellectual property in full in a way that doesn't allow the tax office to take it.
Okay. And is this something that is explained in the email from Dave Kleinman that we looked at a little bit earlier?
No. He was never involved in that.
So if you look at page 285, it says in the middle, 3 paragraphs down from I acknowledge, all Bitcoin will be returned to Dr. Wright on January 1st, 2020. Is this what you're talking about, or? No,
it's not. This was set up the day before. If you read it, it's written terribly.
Is this something you wrote the day before you set up the actual trust? Is that what you're saying?
Before I started setting up the actual trust, yes. It took a little while because of corporate processes. When I wrote this, I was totally drunk.
So you have written this?
Yes.
Okay.
I was completely drunk. I drank 3 bottles of wine. I'd just been served with a bankruptcy notice.
Okay, because it seems to be sort of sent from Dave Kleinman, if you look at page 286. But you're saying that you wrote this when you were terribly drunk?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And then, then after this, you set something different up, and you... Was this something that was in writing, or?
Yes, it was.
And you have still access to those documents?
I do now, but I didn't before. We are now at a period where, although I'm not a trustee, it's post-2020, and I've had other things, and I've taken control of Wright International Investments and other corporations again.
Okay, so you're saying that you have documents that hasn't been presented in this court case that you have access to now?
Um,
That are dated back to 2011?
no, I don't have one, so I've got the current files.
You said you started writing something after this was written, and this is from 2011 as far as I understand.
Yes.
And you started writing something the day after this was written.
I engaged corporate lawyers. The corporate lawyers wrote a trust document.
Okay. And when was
Right
that
now,
finished?
I'm still not the trustee. So I'm in charge of Wright International Investment, which is owned by the trust. The trust is run by a number of lawyers and others.
Okay. And that trust document that you started writing here, is this the deed of trust that we see on page 304? Is that the finished version?
No, this document is a number of documents put together, and my signature's not on it at all.
So this is not is this what you call a it's not a real document? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying this is bits and pieces of documents that are put together as one, possibly scanned into, like, multiple documents that are scanned into one document or something.
Okay. So, but when was that the documents that you started drafting in 2011? When was those finished?
In 2011, but I didn't draft them. As I said, I had a law firm do that.
Okay, and those documents were signed by someone?
Yes.
By whom?
Includes myself, my current wife, a number of corporate lawyers.
The corporate lawyers signed the document?
Yes.
Okay, and when is this document dated?
First of them, 2011, then it was updated in 2012, an update in 2013, an update in 2014, an update in 2016, an update in 2017, and an update in 2020.
So you're saying that there are about 6 different documents related to this trust structure?
No, there's more than 6 documents related to the trust structure.
Okay, but are any of those documents in the case documents in this case?
Possibly, but then, as I said, I'm no longer a trustee. So what you're saying is, as settler, do I have all these documents? No, I don't. Can I get them? Some I can, not all of them, no.
Okay. So then it was set up some sort of trust structure that we haven't seen in 2011. It was signed. And in what way did that trust structure prevent you from getting access to the private keys?
As I've said, the private keys weren't owned by the trust. The trust owned a company, actually owned multiple companies. The trust owned Ecuador, Wright International Investments, Julep Trading Limited, a number of 17 Australian companies, Denarius and De Morgan in Singapore, a few British companies, a Hong Kong company.
Yeah, what
Some
you're
in
saying is that you had a corporate structure and the top was this trust?
Yes.
So at the top there was so you basically gave all these these companies, or you sold them to a trustee?
No, you don't sell them. When you're setting up a trust, I'm the settler. So I put in my assets and I settle the trust. So as the settler, I add my assets to the trust, but I'm not selling them.
Okay, and then there's a trustee that sort of controls the assets. Is that correct?
Yes.
And who was the trustee then in 2011?
There are multiple trustees. It's required under Seychelles law. Dennis Miorca was one of them. He was running out of a company in Kenya.
If you look at page 308, and I understand that you're saying that this document is consisting of several different documents, but if you look at page 308, there's a list of trustees. Are these the trustees, or?
No, they're not. Wen has never been a trustee. David Kleinman has never been a trustee. Panopticrypt was one of the trust companies. Savannah was related. You can't have trustees by PGP keys.
Excuse me, you said that David Kleinman was never a trustee. Does that mean that you are arguing that this document is forged, or that this...
I'm saying that this document has, This page has nothing to do with any of my trusts, no.
Okay. So, and then there were several trustees, and there was some sort of arrangement between these trustees then on how they should make decisions on trust assets?
The whole thing was, don't make any decisions. It's very simple.
Yeah, so the trustees are going to own companies, and they're not going to make any decisions regarding the companies that they own?
Their entire thing was to make sure that nothing changes. The corporations run, the corporations keep going, and no sale, no change. So effectively what you're saying is, can they trade the shares? No.
Okay.
All the shares stay, they cannot sell them.
And in Wright International, then you were the CEO or the
I
boss?
resigned as CEO in 2015.
And who decided what happened in Wright International in 2011?
There was a corporate lawyer put in charge. Basically, the whole thing was nothing happens with the company and it stays the way it is. Fees get filed, yada, yada, yada.
But and you're saying that Wright International owned the Satoshi Bitcoin that we agreed to call the Bitcoin in the first 12 addresses.
Yes.
And would then Wright International be able to access the private keys to those Bitcoin?
No. This is where people go wrong. The thing that is called the Tulip Trust, a program, was a basically modified Shamir sharing scheme where each slice of a key was given to different individuals. This is the bit that people keep confusing with the actual trust. It's a computer program that I called Tulip Trust. So that acted as a system that controlled an AES key accessing other digital data, which was encrypted.
Okay, and then there was different key slices to this that would make it open?
Yes, now we're getting it.
And if we look at page 308 and the companies and people mentioned there, did these people, are these people and companies the ones that had those key slices?
Wen had a key, I had some keys, Dave Kleinman, Panopticrypt had keys. The others are wrong, no. So this is not the correct one.
Okay, and is there any documents in existence that actually shows who are the key holders, the slice holders?
Yes, there's some in evidence. There's communications with Rob McGregor, but I don't remember what number it is.
Okay. So what would it take for you to then access the private keys through this Shamir secret sharing scheme?
The whole point is you don't need the private keys. That's what I'm trying to tell people. Bitcoin's not actually encrypted. What I'm trying to get people to understand right now is...
No, I'm just asking, what would it take for you to get access to the private keys? I understand that you don't want to get access, but if you wanted.
I haven't even thought it through because I don't need to.
But you did get access at some point, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And that was in 2016, correct?
That is correct.
And was that the only time you had access to those private keys?
No, I said up until I put them into the encrypted file. I had the algorithm that could calculate the private keys. So remember, you can actually create blocks and do an additive function where you have new addresses, new keys every time without having the private keys. So you can mine without using them.
Understood. So until 2011, you could use this algorithmic program to calculate the private keys, or some version of private keys. And then from 2011 and until 2016, you could not access the private keys. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But then in 2016, at some point, you got access to the private keys.
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about how this came to be?
I put in a number of requests. I had other people in the corporation sign off on those. I had been issued with a number of key slices to access the file. I had legal advice from Baker and McKenzie concerning that. And I accessed the file to access the algorithm and calculate the first 12 addresses.
Okay. And was this something you couldn't have done this before if you wanted to?
It would require that I go through the whole process, get approval, etc. Yes.
And when you say that you don't have access to them now, is that because you don't want to go through the same process, or?
No, because I stomped on a hard drive that contains some of the slices.
I think we'll come back to that in a little while. So then you went through all this corporate stuff, and then how did you then? And then you calculated the keys yourself. Is that what you're saying?
I ran the program too. Yes.
And then you got the keys, and how did you then contain the keys? Sort of, is that sort of just on a paper, or is it on some sort of memory stick?
Wallet file.
It's a regular wallet file. And are those the keys that you used to do all the signings, both in March and April?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Because in the case preparation, you have stated in your briefs to the court that you received the private keys on a USB stick from when?
I received key slices. So people keep putting this down wrong. So I received key slices. Those key slices allowed me to access things that calculate the private keys.
And are those the key slices that you got from when? Were those necessary for you to calculate, or were they sort of?
No, I already had enough from other people.
Because you didn't need the slices from when?
No, I didn't.
Because in the case preparation phase, you said that you destroyed the hard USB stick from when with a hammer. Is that correct?
No, I said I destroyed my USB stick and my hard drive.
So you
Didn't say the one from when.
Well, then I think we need to look it up, what you actually said in the brief to the court.
See there.
Ja, det som spørsmålet. I'll get back to that. Okay, so then after the signing sessions were finished, you destroyed your hard drive?
Yes.
And what was on that hard drive?
Basically, that was the first 12 keys and a number of key slices.
So the wallet that you just mentioned, that was a wallet that was only on that hard
drive and a USB stick, yes.
And you destroyed both with a hammer?
Yes.
And
well, I stomped on one with my foot, so that's a bit different.
And why did you do that?
Because the whole point I'm trying to make, and I'm going to make, Bitcoin is not encrypted. Bitcoin can be seized, Bitcoin can be frozen, Bitcoin acts within the law. There is a lot of misinformation from BTC maximalists who want to go back to drug markets, child porn, pedophilia, and they don't want legal enforcement of Bitcoin. I want to make sure that judges and courts understand that Bitcoin is not encrypted and it can be seized, frozen, and accessed under a court order. I want to make sure that the lies about thousands and thousands of nodes are understood and that people understand that BTC has 15 nodes, 3 of which control 59% of the hash power today. I want it known that these lies, these slanderous accusations about how law enforcement can't take Bitcoin from criminals are wrong.
Do you think that destroying the hard drive would prove that?
I think it's the only way. I think otherwise people will end up forcing me into doing something I don't want to do.
Just for the reference sake, I'm just reading from the brief regarding the USB stick.
Page.
168.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't put that on the screen because it's not working on the screen.
Right, it says Wright had a storage unit. Wright has said that this is a USB stick and not a hard drive that contained the keys that were used in each of the demonstrations in 2016. In May 2016, after the demonstration was carried through, Wright destroyed the USB stick with a hammer. There were no recordings of Wright destroying the USB stick. And this is then in relation to what's been earlier stated, that got the private keys on a USB stick from Nguyen. But what you're not saying that the USB stick that you're talking about here is not the USB stick that you got from Nguyen.
No, and you're confounding private keys with the key slices for the private keys from when with the later extracted data on the hard drive and the USB stick.
Well, I'm just reading what your lawyers said, so I'm not confusing anything, I think.
My lawyers put things in Norwegian and then sent me translations, and some of those have changed each time I've seen them. But what I've said and what I'm stating to you right now is exactly how it is. The keys were a type of key slice using a Shamir scheme. That accessed a AES symmetric encryption key. That encryption key accessed an algorithm that creates the private keys, as you're saying. They were extracted from that to another hard drive and another USB stick.
Okay, and on page 201 in the same, it says it was Nguyen that gave Wright access to the private keys that was necessary to be used in the demonstration in March and April. So this is then different from what you're explaining now, because she didn't really give you anything of relevance to you getting access to the private keys.
It would have given me access if I didn't already have enough from other people to give me access.
Yep.
So, I mean, she gave me ones that are for access, but she gave it after other people had already given me ones to get access.
Understood. And then, do you remember when you destroyed the hard drive and the USB stick?
Not exactly. A little bit after I came back from hospital.
So it was okay. So it was middle of or start of May sometime.
I don't remember. I was not in a good state when I came back from hospital.
Okay. And then you said that you do not have any possibility to get the private keys anymore. So that was correct, right? And when did it occur that you were unable to access this again?
When I stomped on the hard drive.
In May?
Mm.
Okay, so when you destroyed the hard drive in May to prove that Bitcoin was not encrypted, or you actually destroyed your possibility to access the Bitcoin again?
No. Bitcoin's like a paper ledger. As I said, I'm old, I like paper. Now, if you actually think about what you learn when you're doing solicitor's trust type stuff over here, I'm not sure what the equivalent would be, but when you're doing records, if you make a mistake in accounting ledgers, you can always update it. So this idea is you can't change the blockchain, but you can put amendments and changes that way. But everything is public. So any alteration, including having a court order that reassigns Bitcoin, because it's not encrypted, can always be done, but it has to be a public thing, such as a court order given, published to the blockchain, and then the reissue done. Now, people like this will say that can't be done, Bitcoin's encrypted. Wrong. What they don't want is those people who access Bitcoin for illicit means, who don't pay tax, like when you get millions of dollars and you call it donations, and you say that you don't have to pay tax on it because it's a donation for a legal case, which is criminal. those sort of people end up having their money taken by government because that's a good thing, because criminals shouldn't profit. Bitcoin's not designed to allow criminals to profit, and this is a system that is public, auditable, and allows basically judges to decide when someone has committed a crime that their money should be frozen or seized.
Yes. What you're saying is that you believe that it should be possible to get a court order granting you access to the Bitcoin again. Is that what you're saying?
If you get a court order, it can happen.
Okay.
People don't want that to happen. But that's very easy. It can be assigned because it is public. There's no encryption. I keep mentioning this. Bitcoin is not encrypted. It is a ledger, and you can change ledgers. If you make a mistake on an accounting ledger, a paper ledger, you don't rewrite a double entry ledger. What you do is you add an appendage to the bottom saying, at entry number such and such, there is a mistake. This has been corrected for these reasons.
Understood.
That can occur in Bitcoin.
And is that a part of your plan to get access to the Satoshi keys through courts?
No, I don't even really care about the Satoshi keys. I've got other ones that I care. The fact that we've got a company with now thousands of patents issued, that's valuable. We are about to take action against Ethereum for NFTs because they're breaching our patent. That's worth billions. So,
but you have actually taken action to get access to keys that you have, or to Bitcoin at least, that you have lost, isn't that correct?
Not lost, had stolen. So
yes.
What we're talking about are stolen Bitcoin. And yes, I'm taking action to have the thieves not benefit. Thieves should not benefit from stolen property.
Yeah. And what you're saying is that the same principle could be applied to the Satoshi Bitcoin that you once owned to 1.1
You would
million.
actually need a record of all of those Bitcoin. Something like accounting logs on a cloud server dating to 2009 that Wright International Investment has, which is run by a third-party web service that records all of that information.
Okay. But even if you would get such a court order saying that since you're Satoshi Nakamoto, you are entitled to his Bitcoin fortune of 1.1 million.
Sorry, Satoshi never had 1.1 million. That's an error. That is a calculation done by someone on the web, and it's disputed. That's wrong.
Okay. But you still wouldn't be able to sign a private message with the first blocks, is that correct?
Nobody can sign a private message. Signature means identity. So what you're talking about is using a digital signature algorithm to follow up through that process. When you mentioned earlier, like Charlie from Litecoin signing, the difference was Charlie was always known. His keys were registered in effect. People knew Charlie owned that key. You can't do that. It's like saying, my car keys, therefore I own this car. But if I give my car keys to you, you may have my car keys, but you don't own my car. So you can't sign unless you have already registered. If you look at the European legislation, digital signature legislation requires that first you come in with identity. Once you have proven your identity, then you register the key. You don't do it the other way around. You can't come in later and go, I promise this was my key.
No, I think I understand what you're getting at, but what you're saying is that, if I give my password to someone to my digital signature in Adobe, for instance, and they sign with my password, that's not a signature because it wasn't me that entered into the password?
No, there have been recent cases in Britain and America on this. There was one recently where a company director in the UK had given it to his secretary, and the court said it wasn't a signature.
I don't think that what the signature is or isn't is that relevant for my question, because you wouldn't be able to sign, or whatever you would call it, with the private keys that the public key from block 1 or 2 or 3 are derived from.
No. You're asking whether I can use those private keys to use that algorithm and create the equivalent of a signature.
The equivalent, yes, that's what I'm asking.
No.
No, you couldn't do that. No.
Your argument is that's proving identity. I'm saying that is not how identity is proven. Identity is proven by people.
Well, it proves that you have access to the private keys, right?
Control is not anything important. That goes back to the Dread Pirate Robert defense. That was presented by Ross Ulbricht in Silk Road. Silk Road is a dark website. The Dread Pirate Robert defense, which has been used extensively by dark web operators, is I only have control of these keys, like I just got given them and etc. So I'm sorry, but identity has to be something separate. My white paper notes that identity is firewalled from the blockchain. As it is firewalled from the blockchain, that means that it cannot link at all. You cannot say identity from keys.
Understood.
Sorry, I'm not going to go down that path.
Okay, but still you did sign for John Matones and Gavin Andresen, isn't that correct?
No, I used the key. I didn't sign. I used the signature algorithm with the private key.
What was the purpose of that?
Being conned into it by Rob and others to keep them happy and shut them up.
But the purpose was to prove your identity, correct?
No, the purpose of proving my identity was going through the other processes.
Okay, so we should rely anything on the signing part.
The way you're saying, did I have the keys at the time? Yes, I did. So that depends on whether you think that's reliable. Did I control keys? Does that prove who I am? No. You prove identity through knowledge. You prove it through personal relationships. When Cervus wanted to prove that he created Don Quixote because someone else had said, no, I wrote it, Cervus in Spain rewrote a second copy, demonstrated his writing, and proved to the world that he was the author through his actions.
Okay, but so what you're saying is that people shouldn't really, whether or not you signed for Gavin Andresen doesn't really prove anything. That's what you're saying.
No, what proves it is my time talking to Gavin. Yeah. Only Gavin and I knew intimate details about how we communicated. Gavin never shared his emails. Gavin never had them hacked or put out on the internet. No one knew Gavin's emails except for Gavin. No one knew Gavin's communications with Satoshi except for Gavin. So the simple thing is, who understood all that? Who knew it? Who used the right words?
Okay, but and then when you destroyed the hard drive sometime in the beginning of May, you basically made it impossible for you to do any more signings or the equivalent of signings. That's what you're saying, right?
Not completely, but incredibly difficult.
In what way?
In theory, I could probably track down when and get other people and do other things that might give access, but I haven't even tried to see whether I could do that.
Okay, okay. So you're saying it might be possible, but you haven't tried, and you're probably not going to try either?
Not probably, I'm not going to.
Okay. And during the signing sessions, did you in any way store the signature that you did, or the equivalent of a signature?
It was on the machine, so it would be in memory, etc. But what I did with Gavin was we typed it into the other machine. As you might guess, that's why we had errors, because typing a signature file from one machine to another is hard.
But you didn't keep it any record of it, so it would be possible to sort of
I did not.
Show it to someone afterwards?
Nope, I did not.
And was that something you thought of doing, or?
Nope, I didn't ever want to try going down the track of saying, I've got a key, that's my identity. It's exactly antithetical to the nature of what's in Bitcoin. I stated, and I'll say this again, in Bitcoin, identity is firewalled from the blockchain. Identity is not related to keys. Every single transaction should have a separate key. It is stated in my white paper, and I created a system that is opposite to PGP, where you hold a key and say what you are. So if you think I'm going to go against the system I created, the words I said as Satoshi, the paper I said, you're wrong.
Okay, but and what you're saying is that you did this on purpose? You didn't want to have any evidence left after the signing session? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't want any evidence. I don't want the arguments that you need keys to access the blockchain. Yes, you can say this is risk. I think it's the most important thing I've ever done in my life, because I think if I can't get judges, law enforcement and others to understand that you have control and access over the blockchain that you can stop criminals, then I've failed.
Okay. I think we can go to the Sartre blog, which is on page 480. Or, yeah, it starts on 479. And I just would like to ask you some questions about this and what we're actually seeing here, because you've gotten a lot of questions from your lawyers, but no one has actually gone into the actual blog here to actually see what it says. So the first thing I want to ask you about is what we see on the bottom of the page. There's a screenshot there, and it says the first stage of this exercise will be to explain hash functions. In the figure below, we're displaying a file called sn7message.txt.
Yes.
And is the screenshot that we see below there, is that the content of snmessage.txt? Does it show it?
It doesn't say the content, no.
It doesn't show the content?
No, it does not.
What does it show?
You have to zoom in a little bit more for me, please.
See, there's some commands. It says a little bit of up top. Is it hex dump sn7 message.txt? There's something that looks like a hash below there. Is that the content of the sn7 message.txt file?
That's a hex dump from the file, yes.
Okay, so this is the hash that it contains. Okay, and then there's on the next page. It's some, or actually, we can, if you just scroll back to the first page, under key verification, you say, it says, in the remainder of this post, I will explain the process of verifying a set of cryptographic keys.
Yes.
And what set of cryptographic keys are we verifying in this post?
Any. It is not mentioning what you'll do. It is, I understand how to verify keys. I'm not going to.
Yes, but it is a particular set of cryptographic keys that are actually used in this example, isn't it?
Oh, it's just one of the early existing transactions. Yes.
So what you're saying is that you will explain the process of verifying the cryptographic keys belonging to Satoshi Nakamoto, correct?
No, I'm explaining the process of verifying a transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain.
And to do that, you're using the cryptographic keys that are assumed to belong to Satoshi Nakamoto.
No, I'm not using the keys assumed to, I'm using the transaction data, the signature information on the blockchain. So that's not using the keys. There's no private key involved here.
But what keys are you verifying by doing this exercise?
You're verifying the signature process.
But I think we agree that the signature used is the signature of the transaction between Satoshi and Hal Finney on 12th of January, right?
It's the one that Hal Finney said. So I'll say, yes, it was one sent to Hal Finney.
Yeah. And that's the signature of that transaction. So that would mean that it's a signature of something that Satoshi once signed to send this Bitcoin to Hal Finney, right?
That is correct.
So by verifying the set of cryptographic keys in this blog post, you're verifying the signature that this is a signature by one of Satoshi's private keys, right?
You're demonstrating that you can verify one of the existing blockchain transactions that have already been verified. This is how the process works, yes.
Yes. So what you're actually verifying here is just you can verify that the transaction between Hal Finney and Satoshi 12th of January were actually signed by this signature, and this was actually signed by Satoshi. That's what we're verifying, right?
Not that it was signed by Satoshi. You can't know that from this information.
It was signed by the person.
You're saying that the process on the Bitcoin blockchain was verified.
Yeah, and it was verified by the one who had access to the private keys. That's the
No,
public.
the verification process is public. So The signature process that you're talking about was the person with the private key.
That was Satoshi
Yes, that was me.
in 12th of January 2009, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. And then we can go to the next page. There's a header called hashing. And then it says in the figure above, we have run this on several files, and you're talking about the hash function. The one that we're, and you said that the particular file that we were using is one we have called Sartre, right?
Yep.
So and in the screenshot above the thing that I just wrote or read, we can what can we see there? Can you explain it to us?
You have to zoom in a little bit, sorry.
I can see that there's a command SHA-256 sum Sartre, and then there's a hash digest below. So that starts with 479, right?
Yes.
So that's the hash digest from the Sartre file, right?
From that particular file on this machine at that time, yes.
Yes. And that hash that we see there, that's the same content of the SN7 message.txt. Is that correct?
Sorry, you have to scroll up again.
That's from the previous page. Start with 479.
Yeah, you lost me. 479?
Yeah, on the previous page, on page 4. No, sorry. Yeah, it's there's two types of
SN7's
479
not
here.
Sartre.
Sorry?
SN7's not Sartre, by the way.
I think we all agree on that. I'm just trying to explain what this post says. So on the bottom of this post, the SN7 message.txt, it includes an hash. And we see that hash starts with 479.
That's rather difficult to see. Where is that in that black box? And I can try to zoom in.
It's in the black box. The content, it's 000-479F 9DFF 10155.
So yes, in this one, we're doing snmessage.txt, which is Satoshi Nakamoto and one of the transactions.
Yeah, so the content of the snmessage.txt file, that is the raw data from the Satoshi Halfini transaction, right?
I'd have to double
It's
check,
a hash,
but
it's a
probably
hash.
most likely yes.
It's a hash of that transaction. And then, but on page 480, the one we just looked at, you're saying that the hash that's included in the SN7 message.txt file, that is a hash of a file called Sartre.
No, I'm not.
Well, that's the command that we see on the screenshot, isn't that correct?
There is a hash file for Sartre. There is a checksum also given for other keys.
We can see that you do a SHA-256 sum of the file Sartre. And
Yes,
yes.
but that's not what I'm saying that I'm doing. You'll also notice that I explain in there that I'm doing SN7. That's a screenshot of other things I've done. So no, I'm not saying that I'm doing Sartre in this.
Well, you are saying that. You're saying the particular file that we will be using is one that we have called Sartre. You're saying that in the text below the screenshot.
I also say SN7.
Well, that's the hash of the Sartre file.
No, doesn't say that that's the hash of the Sartre file. I'm sorry.
It says so in the screenshot, and then you're saying the
No,
contents
it doesn't. I mean, you're saying that's not Sartre.txt. So you're confusing the fact that I've done a process under Sartre where I've saved a hash. That's not Sartre.txt. The Sartre.txt file isn't the one there, and I've displayed it in the one above. So no. What you're trying to do is say that I've created this to fool people. That's wrong. I have not at any point said that these are the same things. You have assumed that falsely.
Well, me and a lot of other people, I think, but you really do say that you hash Sartre.
I did hash Sartre, but I didn't hash it here.
And then you say that the content of the file has been displayed in the figure below, and then you show the Sartre speech. At least parts of the Sartre speech. But what you're saying is that you didn't mean to hash the Sartre file. You really just used the transaction
both.
data. You did both.
But I'm not giving you anything to do with the Sartre one. The whole point is, as I say at the beginning, the comment I made is Satoshi ain't coming back. And at that time, I agreed. I wasn't going to come out. I said that I'm gone. I'm not signing. This is a very simple process. I don't want to sign. I'm not going to sign. That's my blog post.
Okay, and on page 481, you have to move on if we're going to. So just above the some scripts, on almost on the bottom.
You zoom in, please.
Where do you want me to zoom in?
On the bottom, I just want to read the paragraph just above some scripts.
Yeah.
So here you say, I could have simply signed a message in Electrum as I did in private sessions. Loading such a message would have been far simpler. I am known for a long history of being difficult and disliking being told what I need to do. The consequence of all of this is that I will not make it simple. What did you mean by that?
I mean exactly that. I'm not going to give you a series of digitally signed files. I'm not going to jump through hoops for Rob. Basically, the only way you're going to prove is the traditional way. I'm going to walk people in who knew me from 1999 or earlier. I'm going to get people from universities I'm involved with. I'm going to go over the patenting process. I'm going to go over the companies I formed. I'm going to go over the corporate filings I did back from 1997. And I'm going to prove identity the way that you prove identity when I do. Okay. I'm going to do it by walking in up to 100 people. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm grabbing people that used to work for my corporations. I'm grabbing people that used to be my friends, that are still my friends, people who knew me when I constructed things. When you say that I can't code, I'm going to get people from large corporations.
Okay, I think we need to get to the next question. If we go to page 979, that's an email from you to Gavin Andresen, the 2nd of May. And there you said there is...
No, it's not.
In what way is it not?
On the 1st of May, when I refused to do everything, Rob took over the email. Rob was in charge of Encrypt, Robert McGregor, and Rob started writing as me. That's why I went back afterwards to using RCGABR, because no, it's not me.
So you're saying that any email that's sent from this email address after 2nd of May is not sent from you?
By this time on the 2nd of May, not me, no.
So okay.
The one that was sent on the 3rd of May, for instance, I was in hospital unconscious. It's really difficult when you're unconscious to write emails.
And then the email on 982, you didn't write that either?
Sorry, which one are we looking at?
982.
Nope, that's not me. Okay. This one on the 3rd of May, I'd attempted suicide. I was in hospital. I was unconscious. I had my neck sewn up. So no, I didn't have a laptop while I was unconscious after committing suicide or attempting suicide. So really difficult.
And then the email in 987, is that an email from you?
Yes, this one's from me.
And then you say there are several issues with publicly proving I am or was Satoshi, you say.
Yes, I didn't want to do it, and I didn't want to be forced into it.
And what were the issues?
Basically, if I'd done it, it would have been a dog and pony show. And Rob wanted to put me on talk shows. He wanted me to go round. Right now, I have enough time wasted with doing things like this that I'm away from my team, that I'm not developing my IP, that I'm not patenting, that I'm not developing code. If I'd been doing this, I would not have 57 or so % of my patents filed. I would not have even 1%. I would not be doing anything but going round and doing a whole lot of BS, talk shows, TEDx's and things like that, and nothing more. So that is a problem.
So what you're saying is that you did this on purpose to actually not prove that you were Satoshi?
Yes, I made sure that I was not going to, with the Sartre thing, I said, I am not crossing that line. I had told Rob I was not going to do a public signing. I had told Rob I was not going to come out, and he still forced it because he had a deal that he was putting together with damn Google. I hate Silicon Valley. I can't stand them. I think they're the whole problem of the world right now. This whole splitting people into tribes like Google, where you give different algorithms, so you polarize people and they have confirmation bias in what they read. It is evil. I would kill myself before I gave myself to Google. You think $1 billion is worth selling my freaking soul?
Okay. So at this point, you published this Sartre post on purpose to actually not prove that you were Satoshi, and then at some point you destroyed the hard drive.
Yes.
Would this be after this email or before, you think?
Before this email, yes.
So, yeah, so at this point, it was really impossible for you to actually do a re-signing or something like that?
Not impossible, but incredibly difficult.
Okay. I think if we're planning on ending at 4, I think I just have one more question, but my colleague will have a couple just. If we go to the handwritten...
Unnskyld, administrator, bare I forhold til tid, at det er ferdig til 4, regner jeg med?
Ja, jeg regner med det. Jeg skal ja. So, the handwritten paper on page 57. And yeah, I think you said that the Bitcoin part were added much longer, much later, you said.
Yeah, that's why it's in red.
Yeah. But how is it that if you go to page 87, see the second to last line there?
Mm-hmm.
See that you've already written Bitcoin?
I'd already called it a number of possible names, including time chain. But Bitcoin was not one of the ones I was not thinking about.
Seems to me like you're using Bitcoin as it's already something that's a thing. Say it like that.
Bitcoin was one of the possible names that I had right from the beginning.
Okay.
So yes, I've used it and time chain.
But if we look at the last part of this document, it's page 134, which should include your alternatives at this point. Bitcoin is not mentioned as one of the alternatives there.
Not on that page, no.
This is the last page of the document.
No, it's not. It's the cover. The cover I write on right from the beginning and the end.
It's the last page of this document.
It's not a last page, it's a cover page. I write on covers differently than I write on the other pages, so that's not a last page, sorry.
Well, it's the last page of the only document that's been presented in the case.
No, it's the cover page. It is the cardboard at the back. And yes, I open up cardboard things and write at the back, sometimes at the beginning, sometimes at the end.
I don't have any more questions.
Tack. Just a couple of really quick questions from me. How many Twitter followers do you have?
I don't run my Twitter account, I don't know.
You don't run your Twitter account?
No, I have no access to that Twitter account.
Have you ever?
I had a Twitter account. I had the Professor Faustus account.
Okay. Do you remember how many Twitter followers you had there?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, could we just quickly look at T519? If you look there, it says on the banner, followers, about 70,000. Does that sound right to you?
Possibly, yes.
Possibly, okay. We've seen quite a few tweets from you using explicit and strong language. We went through some of them, and we went through Jihan is a deceitful shit and Hodl is a scammer. You ask someone to eat shit and so on and so forth. You said just previously when your lawyer was asking you questions that you use strong language when you are being insulted and attacked. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Can we just go to page 516? And at the very bottom, if you just zoom in a little bit, and just a bit further, and we get to these
Sorry,
questions.
I'm trying to ask nicely, but it's
Yes, sorry, so it's okay. Just at the bottom there, you see, we've already been through this, but someone is asking you, why not move some BTC and basically shut everyone up? Why not sign something? And you say, no, I want losers like you to eat shit, but that is being nice. Did you feel like you were being attacked here or insulted?
That person had also said other things and done other posts. So it wasn't just this bit. He also ignored the fact that I pointed out that Satoshi's so-called PGP key did not exist in the current format before February 28th, 2011 on the site. People link that and say that it was earlier and put out a link to 2009. When you go back on the Wayback Machine, you find that actually is 2011, which was after I stopped managing the website as Satoshi. So this individual didn't just do that. He sent emails to my corporation and people inside there. So yes, I call him that because if he's going to email people in my company and tell them basically that I should do X, Y, Z and that I'm probably scamming them, I'm not going to be happy with them, no.
But he's asking just below, why insult me? I asked a fair question, just use the keys, etc.
I've had conversations with this person before.
Okay.
I've noted the bit that I've been talking to you. It's not about using keys. You prove identity, as I even say in my white paper, not by using keys, but by proving identity the traditional way. And after a while of all of this, including, as you see above, being called a con artist, I overreacted. And I admit I overreacted.
Okay.
But
Understood.
on the same day I'd been called a con artist and other such things. Half of these you don't see, like some of the threads there where it says to, etc., they're not all displayed. So some of the
Understood.
other things are extra material.
I'm going to move on, but you also said that in relation to all these tweets that you only use truth and you were talking about someone being a fraud, etc. You also called the founder of WikiLeaks a rapist. But is it not true that the charges against Julian Assange were dropped?
Julian Assange, at my current understanding, is in prison in America.
For being a rapist?
He had charges for being a rapist, and he has charges for other things as well. The woman hasn't dropped those things, but it's gone past statutory time. So statutory time is...
Did you, when you posted this tweet, had he been convicted? Did you know that?
He's been charged, and I've spoken to the woman involved, and I believe her. So I'm sorry, but if you decide that you should be able to go beyond what a woman says, then it's still rape. You can call it, oh, well, I just went a bit further because she didn't say no loud enough. Sorry, that's rape.
Understood. Okay. Also, we saw quite a few examples of you calling people fraud and a scammer, etc. And obviously, we know what the tweets in this case are about. And you've said, like we've seen, a series of other things as well. Is your view that it's okay for you to use strong language, but when other people, like Granath in this case, do it, it's not okay?
No, and if I'm wrong, I'm happy to go up for libel. The distinction is people like Richard Spagliotti from Monero. He's currently facing, I believe, 738 charges of fraud, yet he's posted about them in really positive ways. Jameson Lopp is promoting a Ponzi scam, and I'm saying that because he is actively doing these things. Charlie from Litecoin, who you mentioned before, Charlie spent a week saying, buy Litecoin, buy Litecoin. Litecoin is going to go to the moon. During that time, Charlie was selling Litecoin. Charlie sold all of his Litecoin while lying to his followers on Twitter, telling them how he's going to create this product and it's going to go up in value. That's called front running, and it's fraud.
Okay. Now, obviously, we heard you earlier saying that you were interested. You made it sound like there could have been an amicable solution here. But he deleted the tweets and then initiated, obviously, this case. But then afterwards, you also initiated the case in the UK. Why did you do that?
He didn't delete all the tweets. First of all, the lightning torch was still going. It was still being engaged.
Was that
Millions
something
of
that you
people-
had an issue with?
Yes, his tweets were being sent around via Jack Dorsey and Digital Currency Group to tens of millions of people. Tens of millions. At the same time, he was putting up the taco bit about me being a fraud on his profile, saying that I've deleted this, but it's on my profile. Sorry, that's not deleting. Going on about it in Telegraph does not mean you're stopping. So I'm sorry, when you're having your message still distributed and actively promoting it to tens of millions of people, you are not doing any attempt to stop something.
Okay, and last question, about this amicable solution that you were talking about. Obviously, there was the one where you were requiring him to say that you were Satoshi and that you were sorry, etc. Have you provided any other offers of amicable solution?
There were nothing coming when we got the letter. I would be happy, and I didn't care if people believed I was Satoshi or not. I didn't care if they didn't believe that I was Satoshi. I don't make money out of being Satoshi. I don't get money for conferences. What I was saying to people is, if you want to believe me, look at my technology. Look at the platform I'm developing. If you want to believe I'm Satoshi, that's your choice. I am. I don't care if you believe me or not. If he'd gone to me and went, look, I don't have enough evidence. I don't think he is, but I'm also sorry I called him a fraudster because I have no evidence on that either. That would have been enough.
Tack.
I had noted a couple of questions, but I think they were answered. I have one question. It's stated in the documents that during the signing session that was abrupted, the one you withdrew from, and you had a hard time after that. Just help me understand why that proving session, or proving in that way. I understand what you're saying, that writing with a signature is not proving identity. I understand your point. But why is that harder for you to do than whatever it is you're going through here and in other court cases?
The signature verification process.
No, documenting that you are Satoshi. Why is that more difficult emotionally than...
It's not emotionally difficult. I mean, it was, but it's harder to do because getting... at the moment, we're chasing down witnesses for one of the other cases. I've got a list of close to 70 people now. I want to get to 100. Finding those people, tracking them down, they're in different places around the world. Getting them, talking to them, getting the lawyers, like sometimes the lawyers call them and people go, who are you? So it's a hard process of just, if I haven't spoken to someone in 3 years going, hi, it's Craig here, remember me, and that sort of thing. The process is just time consuming and long. So proving identity, it's like when you...
I understand that you want to prove the identity the way that you want to prove identity. However, I understand that you mean that signing with a key is not the same as signing as proving identity, because it doesn't, having a car key doesn't prove you own the car. However, in this case, as I understand it, everyone agrees that key to block 1 through 12 was in Satoshi's possession, which means that signing with that key wouldn't prove his identity, would be proving that the same person controlled it. Might have been...
Only one of those keys was...
Okay, the Halfini key then.
Yes.
But using that key, I agree, it's not the same as talking to a person saying this is... But
if I do that, then that will that will be it. No one will ever look into anything else. If I do that, no one will look into proving via my past, the patents I'm doing, the people I knew, the processes.
And that's what you want them to do?
Yeah. Soon as I sign with a key, it's over. The other side have already said, James Lopp came out with, if Craig ever signs with a key, all it shows is he stole it. He said that publicly.
Okay, so the rabbit holes will never be satisfied.
But not only them, they've already gone out there to discredit me. But no one, once I do this, will ever do the effort to put together 90 or 100 people, to put past together. It's a lot of work doing this. And as soon as I do that, they'll just go, it's done. And I refuse to have them do the easy way out, which doesn't build identity properly and just goes down into what these coders law people want to do, which is say courts don't matter because we've got Bitcoin.
And the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 witnesses that will appear on your behalf in this case. Mm-hmm. Those are out of those 70 to 100 people, or where do they come in here?
Yes, there are very few. My first lawyers just wouldn't put witnesses in. That's why I changed to these guys. I don't know why they wouldn't get witnesses, but they kept going, no, we need documents. And I replaced them because we got right to the border where we tried to get extra people, and they still would not do it. So, and I want people.
Okay. I understand. Oppfølgingsspørsmål?
Just one question. You had a meeting with the BBC.
Yes.
Was that filmed? Was there a camera there?
There was a camera there.
Yes, yes or no?
Yes.
And did you know that there would be a camera there?
I had signed an agreement saying that there wouldn't be a camera there, and then there was one there anyway.
When you agreed originally. After first you said you refused, but then you agreed sort of as a compromise to do a signing session, and Matones came in. Did you know then that you would be sitting in a meeting with the BBC later on?
No, I was told that John and Gavin would be it.
Okay, there seems to be no further questions for you. Is there anything else you would like to add that you haven't been asked?
No, Your Honour, but I will say that I quite like the court process here. It's much better than people interrupting all the time in American and other courts.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
We are adjourned for today.